Rock on. Thank you, everybody. This is the next installment of our SQL Server Truncated Icosahedron. And I said that right this time. Table, this is Season 1, Episode 3. Thomas Grohser and William Durkin. This is going to be talking about backups and recovery in point blank. If you have not mastered this topic and you're a career DBA that manages this stuff, you're doing it wrong. So listen to the experts here and learn along with us because this is going to be a lot of fun. And with that, go for it.
Okay. Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm Thomas, and
That was a very short one. Hi, I'm William.
okay. And today we're going to talk about backup, restore, and everything that surrounds it. Because in my experience of doing this for 3 decades and more, it's not about the technology. It's all about how you organize it, how you plan it, and how you make sure that everything works. And I want to start with a real nice quote I found a while ago. I think it's famous and people have heard about it, but it's no one cares if you can back up, only if you can restore. Yeah. You can have the best backup plan in the world. If it doesn't allow you to restore when you need to restore, there's no point in having the backups.
Yeah.
It's all about planning how you want to restore and then adjust your backups to make that happen. And I hope today's session we can dive deep. For all that don't know what this is this is the idea. We start here where all the regular sessions stop. Yeah, we first of all we have no time limit. I don't know if YouTube or something has a limit how long a video can be, but I'm pretty sure we're not going to reach that point. But it's that we're not constrained by a clock that we have to finish this in an hour or something. If it takes an hour and a half or 2 hours, we'll get it done. Yeah. And there is no script or anything. We're talking off the cuff from our experience. And I mean, I've seen William do presentations on that topic. That's why I invited him here. So we have a pretty idea how to do this, but I think it's for me, the one thing I want to discuss somewhere along the road, I just want to point it out at the beginning that it's going to come at some point in the video, is how do you ensure that you have backups in 2 locations? Because that's actually way more tricky than thing is. There's so many guidelines or something out there with like how you should do backups and stuff like this with like the 3-2-1 rule or the 3-2-1-1-0 rule and whatever they are out there. And they're all clever and they say, yeah, you need backups in several locations. That's easily said, but when you try to plan something that then works in each and every situation, it's not. So that's something we're going to try to cover at some point. But that's a little bit down the road. Yeah. The first thing is backups are not just there for recovery. I mean, it's the most important thing you do it for, but they have a nice effect. If you have them down for recoverability, you can do much, much more with that. First of all, operational tasks like refreshing lower environments, like testing environments and stuff like this, backups are really handy for that. And the other one is if you have backups for recoverability, all you have to do is not delete them, and you suddenly also have the backups that you need for regulatory and legal reasons. Yeah. And that is also an interesting topic when you hear, especially if you're in Europe, some countries require you to have at least 8 years of backups, and others don't allow you to have more than 7. So the first question you always have to put in your questionnaire when you talk to higher management is, which jail do you prefer? Which country? Because in one of them, you probably have to spend some time because it's almost impossible to satisfy a global requirements when it comes to saving data. But there's backups for recoverability where the priority is, hey, I need to restore as quickly as possible and get back in a good operating state. And there is legal backups, which are the ones 3 years down the road. Someone comes and says, okay, we need the database in June of 2016 or something. Yeah. And then everybody screams and runs around and hopes that all the tapes or wherever you parked the backups are still readable, and then restore from there. But the important thing is when you implement recoverability, all the other ones are basically free. It's just you have to pick and choose which ones you keep for a long period of time. Yeah. And make sure that you only keep the ones you are legally required to have. There's no point, and it's always, when it comes to the legal part, having too many backups is usually worse than having too little, because, hey, there's a backup, you can't read it anymore. Nobody goes to jail for that. You have a backup that you should not have that proves something. Someone might have a problem. Yeah? So
It
it's
sort of goes back to the requirements or what really is needed, right? Like you said, there are many different countries in the world. There are many different industries in those countries, and they have different requirements. I know that you work in highly regulated space. I'm a consultant. I see companies in all different verticals, all different nations, and there's wildly different requirements for data. Well, data archival or holding your data some way. Like you say, for me, a backup is not a backup. It's just part of the entire process of your data management. So, like you said, a backup can be a backup to restore service when a system has died. It can be a refresh for a test system. It can be um, uh, a, a source for your data warehousing. If you have some weird and wonderful process that needs to do it that way, right? You can be really creative with all these things, and regardless of who you talk to, whether it's Thomas, whether it's me, whether it's someone else in your team or another company or whatever, there's always going to be different answers to the questions around how we should do backups and where we should do them and what technologies and how long you should store them and all these sorts of things. um, that basically, like you said, we've got this open time. We could stop the discussion now by just saying what's been said so far, done, and we could go endless as to exactly what it goes into. And when you saw me recently in Vienna doing my presentation, it was not really to do with backups, but to do with dealing with outages of systems. And for me, like I said, a backup is, or as you said as well, it's a useless thing. It's a file on a disk somewhere or on a tape somewhere. It in itself is absolutely valueless until you say, I need what's inside it for doing something. Um, and I encourage a lot of my clients when they're thinking about backing up is to step back even further and to say, like you've said, what would this data be used for? What is this system required? What does my business need this system or this data for before we even think about backing up, before we even think about availability? Quite often we get people coming to us saying, should we have a failover cluster, or should we have availability groups, or should we have snapshotting VMs? It's like, whoa, stop. We don't need technologies just now. We need to figure out what is your system, what is your business need for that system going forward, and what are you trying to protect yourself against? Um, because without those questions answered, you cannot decide what the system should look like in the first place. So it's a talk about backups, but it's also not a talk about backups at all.
Yeah.
What's the point of having an amazing backup that has everything until the last possible transaction ever that was happening in the system, but it takes 6 weeks to restore?
Yeah. No,
The
it's
number of companies that go bust because they have no fast way to restore their systems. You, in the worst case of ransomware, how to restore from that? If you have zero plan, and not just a no plan, but never play through that plan, a disaster recovery test run, then everybody's hair is on fire and no one knows where the fire extinguisher is.
I I once worked for a company where the backup system and restores for normal operations and the typical stuff. Someone dropped the table, we need to restore it yesterday. Worked all great. It worked great. Till one day, we got woken up to an alert that we had 9 million corrupt pages across 7,000 databases. Yeah. What happened is there was a mismatch between the driver, the VMware driver, and the underlying storage system. And the storage system decided writing zeros is much more efficient than actually writing the data. But when you read that back, SQL Server kind of complains about the data. It can't make sense of a page that is composed out of zeros, including the checksum is zero. So that's how we knew it's not wasn't created by SQL Server because thing is. So yeah, okay. We figured out where the problem is, replaced the drivers with working ones, but then we had to restore 7,000 databases. And nobody was prepared to do that. Yeah. We figured out our normal plan would have taken weeks to do that. Yeah. And so we had to switch into we had to come up with a new plan just for that. Luckily, we found something, but it's not always possible. Yeah. If they would have used or switched already to their magic backup appliance that they were looking for, that would not have been possible. Yeah. But luckily, we still had like a buffer with a file share where all the files were first dumped and then from there transported to the archive system, and we could restore from there. Which was not the plan normally, because normally you never need like the backup from 3 hours ago. You always need them from like 1 or 2 days ago when people delete data, because if they would notice it immediately, they would probably
yeah.
So, but again, it can always be. You have to be prepared for the worst case scenario, and then if it never happens, great. Yeah. So when I argue with management about money for backups, I never sell backups. I always sell, you need restore in 3 hours for the whole thing. Okay, that's how much it's going to cost. Because I have to build something where I can restore everything for in 3 hours, and then that thing will handle the backup just fine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it always comes back to the financial side of it, right? So the two acronyms that we always talk about around recovery is RPO and RTO. RPO being recovery point objective and RTO recovery time objective. So just to explain, recovery point objective is if your system has gone offline, you've dropped a table, like you said, or you've deleted some data or whatever, then how much of this data can your company afford to lose? So what point in the past do you need to be able to restore to? And of course, you ask the boss first, and he says, we can lose zero data. It's just not possible. We can't afford to lose data. Now, the second one is the RTO, recovery time objective. This is exactly how long does it take for us to fully recover service. So 9 a.m., somebody has not had their coffee, they drop the table, oh my God, we've got to restore it. It's from last night's backup, let's get it going. And it takes us 2 hours to retrieve the backup, to restore the backup, ensure everything's okay, and restore service. So your recovery time objective is 1 hour. Of course, you say the same thing to your boss. Tell me RPO, RTO. RPO, they say we can lose no data, and RTO, we cannot ever have our system go offline. At which point Thomas goes, A, it's impossible to fulfill both of those things. And B, if it is possible, you need the budget of NASA, because you've got to have redundancies, you've got to have fail safes, you've got to have high availability. And then it's no longer talking about backups, which goes back to what I said at the beginning of, we don't talk about just backups, we talk about the entire system. So a realistic answer to RPO, RTO, we can lose half an hour's data. And we can be offline for 4 hours. Perfect. That gives us a chance to say, what technologies, at what cost does it take us to fulfill losing half an hour's worth of data and fulfilling it to be back online inside 4 hours? If we're better than those numbers, winner. But our absolute worst case must be lose half an hour and be back online in 4 hours. And the solutions for these things are multiple. maybe we don't need to do a full restore of the database to still restore service inside the company. Pen and paper is a restoration of service if you're going to take people's telephone numbers and call them back. It's not brilliant, but it stops that phone call being closed with, I can't help you, goodbye. It's, I'm going to call you back in 15 minutes when the system's online. You call back in 2 hours when it's online, and everybody's happy. You got to be creative with these things. I think a pen and paper is a lot cheaper than redundant system building.
And in my career, actually, in one place we had, it wasn't pen and paper, it was a laser printer, but it was in a financial company that was trading the stock market, and I had the exact discussion that you said with the team leader of that whole division. Well, like
Mm-hmm.
500 or 600 people that were running around on the trading floor and screaming at each other some numbers, and that somehow resulted in money exchanging hands and
Yeah.
buying coffee beans or whatever they did. I don't know. Um, but I talked to him and like, okay, so if the system fails,
Yeah.
what would you need? What would be the perfect thing to give you to actually be able to start working again? So what would
Yeah.
be your best point of restore? Well, he says, the best thing is if you can give me a printout of all the transactions we did in the last hour till
Mm-hmm.
about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you don't need the last 5 minutes. No, my people know what they did 5 minutes ago. If they don't,
Yeah.
I replace them with people that know what they do 5 minutes ago. Yeah. They would not know what they've done half an hour ago because we keep them busy. So I need about an hour of data back because everything that's older than an hour might still be somehow in flight.
Yeah.
So what we literally installed was a big printer that printed out every transaction all the time. I mean, yeah, we cut down some trees, but in the end, it was probably healthier than coming up with a super complex failover structure. A simple
Yeah.
database, if the database was not reachable, the printer blinked and says, here's the paper, and take whatever we have. And that was the DR failover solution for a whole trading thing. You would never think that that would be a solution for that. You would think they would be like, couldn't do anything without computers. No,
No,
because the other side is also prepared to do everything over the phone. Yeah. So they
they
just
just want to
switched
make their
from,
orders, right? They don't care about
yeah,
the system.
just switch from the Bloomberg terminal to the phone and doesn't matter. Yeah.
Exactly.
The stock exchange doesn't care how the order comes in. Yeah.
No, indeed.
And that was a point in my career where I completely started rethinking the whole recovery thing and spent way more time in figuring out what's actually necessary than just come up with a one size fits all solution for the whole company. There's 10,000 databases and we do exactly this step on each one of them. Because it
Mm.
turned out that you probably only needed like 10% of them. The rest was, yeah. I came across databases where there are no backups needed. And we're
Yep.
talking multi-terabyte databases. And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, if we have a problem, UPS delivers a new copy of the data tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
And what do you mean? No, they send a new appliance. We take out the old appliance, we plug in the new one, and we're back online.
Exactly.
That's how sometimes it gets out of sync, and they just send a new one to get it back in sync again. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the tick information from the stock exchanges that like every time a price changes, which is
Mm-hmm.
several million times a second,
Exactly.
there's no way of backing up or restoring that data. They just, hey, you have a system that doesn't come got out of sync. Yeah, here's a new one. And you send back the old one and they recycle it and refill it with new data over weeks. Yeah.
But this is the thing, right?
So
It's the understanding of the systems and what they're used for helps to make that actually sensible. Because who would think just send a whole new appliance? Only the people who know the business, right? If I heard somebody say, I need a system that's 10 terabytes and it never needs backing up, I would be like, you're crazy. That 10 terabytes, that must be really valuable data. Yes, it is valuable, but there's no way that you can catch up either, right? If you try to restore 10 terabytes from outside and send it into your network, it's never going to happen. Just like you say, send it via UPS. Um,
yeah.
it's really strange to come in from the outside and see these things and try and understand. But it pushes back to a classification system. This is something that I've tried recently to try with my clients. Can you figure this out for me, please? Tell me how important each of your different systems are, what the relevance is to the operations of the company. So a real good one was was it 2 weeks ago? A client of ours, they sell screwdrivers, hammers, things like this for people who work in the trades. And they have a warehouse, but they also have a brand new warehouse they're building. It's one of these really tall automated warehouse systems. It's got robots that go and click things from boxes. And they said in the description of how we're trying to plan the IT infrastructure for it, they said, if this system stops working, our entire company can no longer work. This was the IT admin responsible for this system. So, of course, he sees it as essential and critical for the company. At the same time, they don't want to have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week support from an external IT supplier like us, because we're expensive, because 24/7 is expensive. You've got to have people on rotation, they've got to be available, blah, 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 blah. So I pushed back a little bit on that. I said, look, you want to roll this system out in the next 2 months. We've not even talked about 24/7 before. Now you're bringing this up as it being a critical system, that if this doesn't work, the entire company stands still. I think we need to have a really big meeting with all the big bosses. At which point, the IT director hears this and says, whoa, 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 whoa. It's an important system, but this part of the warehouse stores screws and nails and washers and tiny pieces of metal. If somebody orders 1,000 of them and we can't deliver it for today, but only tomorrow because the system's offline and needs to be brought back online, that's not critical. The company definitely can continue to work without this system operating. We don't need 24/7. So it's always that like battle inside of a company. If I ask the receptionist how important is the mailbox and the telephone, for their job, it's essential. For somebody in the warehouse screwing screws and bashing hammers, they're like, I don't care about that. The hammers are important to me. So you have those discussions at different levels to figure out who cares. That single person, it's their center of their work life, but for the overall operation, not so much.
I've consulted for pharmaceutical companies years ago, and when it came to planning all these outages and all that, the IT Jeff conducted a survey within the company, and it turned out if IT is down for 1 or 2 days, the company has zero problem. Even 3 and 4 days, some departments could work because they always had to do like monthly intense cleanings of that production room. Okay, we can't run a production cycle today. Let's do the cleaning today. Yeah. The office people says, yeah, I have at least 6 or 7 hours of filing of papers to do at any point in time. I can do that the whole day instead of like mixing it up with IT. Yeah. So they had no need for anything that was high availability. The only thing they wanted like highly available was that they can get in new orders. So if a customer tries to contact them, that they can do that. But everything else, they were not like, we're sending this out within 5 minutes. This is this is like, hey, you're ordering, I need in 6 months, I need that supplied. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. It's so funny.
So
Many companies seem to think that they're Amazon or Google, and have expectations of their IT systems or any other technical systems to be on the level of an Amazon. And come on, I mean,
yeah,
there's a handful of companies on the planet with a similar sort of requirements to an Amazon. It just doesn't.
it
It's not
exists.
required.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even
they exist, but there's
yeah.
like it's a handful of companies. Of the millions of companies out there, it looks cool. It
And
sounds super cool, but it is also awful.
yeah, often it also depends on the time of the day how important something is.
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I work for a 24/7 online gambling operation. Yeah. Sports betting. Yeah. Famous in Europe, lots of business there. And what we learned over time was if the system fails in the morning or at night for European time zones, yeah, we have zero business for like an hour till we're back online. But then the next hour, we have twice as much business as before. So people are just coming back in an hour and trying again
Yeah,
and then doing their business. So thing is,
exactly.
but on the other hand, if it's 5 minutes before the finals of the German Bundesliga or something, and you have a failure
That's a
and people
problem.
cannot bet the place on the game that starts in 5 minutes, that's a big problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was always depending day of the time. It's like most companies have this 9 to 5 business. Yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
there's very few that actually do more. They work 10, 12 hours a day where they need their systems. The rest of the time, they don't. Yeah. Yeah. If you're a global company that works around, has offices everywhere, that changes. Yeah. But to sum up what we've discussed in the last couple of minutes is step one of every backup restore plan is figure out what you actually need. I think we gave you enough examples of cases where backups were not as important or restores were not as important as needed because it's better to have the 5 databases that you actually need on an expensive solution than 1,000 databases that you don't need on an average solution. Yeah. And then the 5 that you actually need are also on that average solution. And you're diverting resources away from what's actually important. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the same thing is you don't need a data warehouse 24/7. Yeah. Is it convenient to have it 24/7? Yes. Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember times when data warehouses were loaded once a month. Yeah. And everybody was happy. Yeah. And then we started loading them every day. And then people had the stupid idea of loading them every hour. And then they learned that is a really bad idea because if you run a report in the morning, you get different results than when you run it in the afternoon,
Yep.
and that confuses people. And so um, but it's example step one, figure out what you need backups, how often, and how long do you need to keep them. The problem is that no DBA can actually answer that unless the guy is in the company for 30 years and knows everything. Then yes, but normally you have to go to the business people and as we said correctly, it's really hard to find the person that actually can make the decision. So what I usually do is I start at the bottom. So I get from every department, I get a different most important system.
Yeah.
Then I work my way up and try to rank them into a list of, okay, this is actually what we need, and everything below that line is best effort. Yeah.
Yep.
Everything above
Yep.
that line, we really need. What this thing is for another company that I worked is, they needed about 8 terabytes out of a petabyte to actually
Mm.
what they considered the ability to restart the company.
Yeah.
So
Core
every
business
day we had to
systems.
prepare a drive with that 8 terabyte of data, roughly 8 terabytes. And that drive was then taken by one of the C levels and put somewhere secret. Yeah.
Okay.
We took notes of the serial numbers of the drives or so. We never got the same drive back. So we always got fresh 8 terabyte drives every day. So that was basically a business expense that they were willing to pay every day.
Sure.
But that was like, yeah, we got that. And we had to
Interesting
put
approach.
some backups on that drive, an additional
Yeah.
copy. That was not the only copy, but copied
Sure.
over.
Sure.
And that was considered if the whole thing burns to the ground and all data centers explode at the same time, if you have that hard drive, you can restart the company from scratch. Yeah. There was source code on it. There was whatever. Yeah. We had about
Yeah.
8 terabytes databases, and then there were a couple of gigabytes of other stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
But it's yeah, it was a system that worked. Yeah. And so
But
okay.
again, it's also a question of if the system worked to put it on a disk and move the disk into some safe location.
Yeah.
Did anybody run a restore?
I think yes. I think once a month they did like we so we had twice a year a full disaster recovery where we were running the company out of the DR site. That included
Ah,
people.
okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Mm-hmm.
was done for sure. We had to do restore tests of every database at least once a month. So we had one machine where we every day choose a different server and restored everything on it. So because
Sure.
there was just not enough capacity to restore everything.
Yeah.
And for this drive, what we did is when the data that was on that drive was used for this test, we used that drive to test it.
Okay.
So we copied it to our drive, and then from that drive, we copied it to that magic drive. And then from
Yes.
there, we restored it to our restore machine when it was time, and not from our drive, because the logic was if the file is good on the second drive, it has to be good on the first drive. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's if I
Because that
have the
would be
source, I copy it here and then copy it one more time, and the last one is still okay. There's no way the middle one can be broken. I mean, the chances that
correct.
you have two bit flips, the first time it corrupts it and the second time it fixes it, uh, is it theoretically possible? Yes. I'm willing to live with that odds. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because that would be amazingly hilarious if that actually would happen ever. Yeah, I mean, having two
Yeah,
bit
indeed.
flips in on the same backup is already like insanely impossible, but I mean improbable.
Not
It's
impossible,
it's fun.
improbable. Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This is the point. Is the
So
chances of it
yes,
happening.
and this shows it's you have to plan the whole thing. Yeah. So okay.
But
So now we
again, not
know
just plan, but execute on it. This is the
and
point
execute.
because
Yes. Yeah. No.
I've seen so many companies create the DR plan and never, ever, ever test it. Um, it's shocking because then seriously,
Yeah.
that is the worst time to be doing it for the first time.
At least,
When I
at, at least they had a plan. I had one. Their DR plan was quite literally get out the coffee maker and figure it out. That was printed and signed by some of their people.
But at the same time, if it's been signed off by the upper management as the solution, that's completely okay. You
Mhm.
know, if I'm given a car and I'm told drive against this wall and I say that's going to damage the car and the person says do it anyway, they can't be angry when the car gets damaged. So this is the other side of the whole story is, um, at least for me as a consultant, it's my job to say driving into walls is bad. If the customer decides still we're going to drive into a wall, that's cool because I've given them the recommendation to not drive into walls. So if your example with let's drink some coffee and figure it out, if that's the way they want to do it, if they're cool with that, that's also okay. Even if it sounds crazy, if the business can deal with that and that's an acceptable expense to then spend time and try and figure things out, rock on, go for it.
That was mine. My response to them was, okay, well, here's the caveats, here's the challenges with your plan.
Yeah,
Stated, you've agreed that this is what you want to do. So fine, we'll move on.
exactly. Exactly.
So I'm when again working for the gambling company. We got lucky and Microsoft invited us to do an enterprise test in their lab in Redmond. So they prepared 400 servers for us to rebuild our environment there and then do some testing. And I had about 10 people from the company from all different teams that joined that effort. And they were looking forward. What they did not know, I was the only one knowing because someone had to know. And since it was my idea, I kind of already knew. Thing is, so I had a big Pelican case with about 80 terabytes of backups in there, both applications and databases. And I put a stopwatch in there, and I handed them over the case and says, "Okay, you have 8 hours. Click, because you said you can you can recover in 8 hours." And they actually had a really nice environment because the servers were already installed with Windows patched and joined to a domain. So thing
They
is,
had a head start.
yep, they were really pissed because it took them about 10 hours to do it instead of 8.
Hmm.
And we repeated this every year that we went there because they wanted to prove that they can improve the processes. And after a while, we got it down to like 5 or 6 hours.
That's
But just
perfect.
having a better plan, who does what in which
Yeah,
order, because the hard part is figuring out the order. Yeah. One
exactly.
thing we haven't discussed yet is when you have backups and you can't get to them. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because someone had the requirement the backups need to be encrypted. And nobody took backups of the encryption keys. Uh,
So they ransomware themselves.
yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. Or the encryption keys are in some safe, and the guy who has the keys for the safe is on vacation or something. Yeah. Um, so there's always hurdles when it comes to there. Or the backups are in some location where when the power goes out, you can't get in because you need power to open the door, or
Yep.
there are various conditions that you don't think about under normal circumstances. Yeah. And
But that's the whole point of the DR test, right?
yep.
Ideally, you would have people who are skilled in the actual sysadmin roles, but have no idea of the processes themselves inside your company to step through. And the number of companies that don't even have the standard operating procedure or a run book for a DR scenario is scary. But by doing that, by finding out, oh, yeah, we need to have power to get into that server room to get that certificate to be able to unlock my backups, you can only figure that out by having the guy on holiday who's got the key to that room to be able to access it. Um,
Mhm.
and no plan is complete because you can plan for the worst disaster and then the next disaster happens, right?
Oh
The
yeah.
meteor landing on the plane crash after the nuclear bombs landed.
Yeah. It's
Of
it's
course, you can go
the
crazy and it'll never end, but to get the worst things out of the way, or even the non-worst, the simplest things out of the way of don't let that person go on holiday or have a second person. Um,
no, it's cascading failures. Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Everybody can handle a failure of a network card, a switch fails, a server fails. Yeah. All these things, if a single component fails, there's a plan. Yeah. Or in most cases, we all know that
Hmm.
there's the coffee maker plan where there's no plan at all. But what happens if more than one thing fails at a time? So
Hmm.
what happens if the network fails and the server fails? Okay, now is there a way to get the data with USB drives over there? Or
Hmm.
and all you need is like 5 USB drives in a cabinet somewhere that you can get to if you need something like this. But it could be more complicated. Like you said, one data center fails and the access to the other one is blocked because the access control is in the other data center and didn't fail over. Yeah. So you
Exactly.
suddenly can't get in. So once you start trying to have a plan for multiple failures that happen at the same time, especially if you allow failures of the same thing. Yeah. So it for example, you have a failed network switch and you have a failed power distribution system. Your system can
Hmm.
still run if you have redundant power and redundant network. Your system will still run.
Correct.
But if you have
Yep.
both power feeds failed, there's very
Yes.
few systems that will still run. Yeah.
Hmm.
I know one storage device that would run for another 5 or 6 minutes because they have a big freaking battery at the bottom. Uh, so they
But
don't
again,
trust the UPS. They have their own. Yeah.
and that's where it comes back again to understanding these systems and acceptance for failure versus the cost. Because if you have two power feeds, that is somewhat normal for a data center. Having a third power feed, not so much. Having a generator backup is an expensive thing to have, and
Yeah.
again, if you don't test that on the day that you need it, it will fail. It's just
Oh, yeah.
guaranteed. um, so there, you can it never. It's a never-ending story. You've got to take at some point your systems will fail, and in a way that you cannot recover easily. You have to have contingencies beyond that, and
Mhm.
at some point, the last step is, as David said, let's drink some coffee. Just accept we've been defeated today. We've got to wait for the power feed to come back. We've got to wait for the delivery of a new network switch. We've got to whatever. Um, and then that's okay too. Uh, a thing that I also ran into quite often, one really big one. Friday evening, I get a call from a company. William, what are you doing? And it was 8 p.m. I was like, I'm going to sit down and have a beer and watch a film. And they're like, no, you're not. You're going to jump in your car, go an hour up the highway to this a supermarket chain. whose central distribution system has just died. Okay, fine. Go there on the Friday evening, and then something that I myself also didn't recognize. Everybody's on adrenaline. The system's been offline for 8 hours. It's 4 in the morning. Everybody's really groggy. And somebody was sensible enough to say, listen up, everyone. It's 4 a.m. We all need to sleep. We need to accept the system's broken right now, but everybody needs to step away, clear their brains, get some sleep. It won't be a lot of sleep, but at least some sleep. And I think we went to bed. I was back in the office again at, I think it was like 8 a.m. So I had like 3 hours sleep. They all had 4 or 5 hours sleep because they lived closer to the office. And then everybody was much clearer and much more present. That was not in their standard operating procedures, but was added in to say, hey, wait, we need food, we need water, we need sleep. Maybe we rotate the IT staff so that some can sleep and the others can work. There's a huge people dimension to these things, which also gets forgotten because we only think about the technology and not about the people and the process that belongs to it.
It's not from a disaster recovery plan, but it was in a migration plan. That migration plan had about 600 steps that you had to
Yep.
go through. It started like 3 weeks before the migration and ended like 2 weeks after the migration. Everything you could think of, we had to migrate about 1,200 databases. And that was like for each database, the project manager got the thing and started ticking off and making sure everything is done. And on the day of the migration, there was literally a task to buy lunch,
Yep.
and then to buy later on a step to buy beer to celebrate the success. Yeah.
Yep.
They were steps of the official plan and they were calculated in the budget of the migration. Yeah. But
Perfect.
yeah, we are humans. We have a certain amount of time we can work, and then it gets counterproductive. You make more
Yes,
mistakes than you're actually
exactly.
good. Or if you have a larger team, you can start staggering that, okay, two go to sleep, two keep working,
Yep.
two are on standby. Yeah. If
Hmm.
anything fails anymore or something. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's as we said in the beginning, the surroundings are much more important than the actual craft of issuing the technical commands. It's
Massively. Yeah.
important. You have to understand how your tools work. Yeah. How your whatever software you use to backup, you need to know how it works and how you can trick it around and redirect it and rename things because you will have to. You will have to in a disaster recovery situation, you will have to move a database to a different server. And there
Yep.
might be another database with the same name, and you have to know how to move them in the same place, or they might use the same file name for for something because guess it or not, software developers are not creative people. They are they come
No,
up with the same names. In the financial industry, like 20% of the databases are called trading. It's it does something
exactly.
about trading, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other half is investment or something else, yeah. It's they are completely different databases, but they have the same names. The solution is you put them on
Yep.
different servers, but at some point they might have to commingle and go. Good. So let's assume we now know what we need to back up and how long we have to keep it because we figured it out with the management. And the important thing is you have to have the management sign off on that. It cannot be a decision of the DBA because the DBA is the guy who presses the button but doesn't know how important the content is.
Exactly.
A good DBA has no idea what's in the database.
Well,
If
yes and no. Yes and no.
if they are responsible for tuning and something, then yes. But if
Hmm.
they are just responsible for keeping
Operational
it
DBA.
alive,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
I distinguish between infrastructure DBAs and application DBAs. Application
Yes.
DBAs is more like a developer that
Yep.
takes care of the database once it's running,
Hmm.
where the
Hmm.
infrastructure database DBA is more like the guy who is responsible for the container, not the
Yes.
content. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So for me, I consider myself more in the infrastructure thing is if I can restore the database and put it back, that's where my thing is. What's inside the database, that's the next team over. Yes, in a small
Yep.
company, you have all the hats on the
Multiple
same
hats. Yeah. Yeah.
thing. So yes, that might have come across a little bit wrong.
No. You're just in a comfortable position of having an organization that can make these things happen, right? Like you say,
Yeah.
the smaller the company, the more hats you're going to wear. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for thing is, yeah. So the next thing is you mentioned the R word already, the ransomware.
Yeah.
Which is a topic that more and more comes up. Apparently, more and more companies fail and get victim of ransomware.
Hmm.
And so more and more requests that I'm getting for people is, hey, we need to make this ransomware um, um,
Proof. It
safe.
needs to be. Yeah.
We need to have a plan when ransomware strikes, how we can get back to operations without having to pay the ransom. That's the
Yes.
goal because and then they will make a call. The
Oh
ransom is
yeah.
going to be 5 million. It's going to cost us 20 million to not have to pay. Yeah, no, they pay the five.
With the assumption that paying the 5 will actually unlock it, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, you have to probably pay the five every couple of weeks, but
Yeah, exactly.
it's the thing is, yeah. No, and in the beginning I'm like, yeah, that shouldn't be a problem, but turns out it's actually not that easy to do something that would actually like work in like I won't say in all situations, but in most of them. Yeah. Because the big difference is so there's this 3-2-1 rule, and then it was extended to the 3-2-1-1-0 rule to contain the ransomware stuff. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's you need three backups on two different media and one is at a different physical location. Yeah. And the additional one that came in it and one is offline.
Yeah.
And that is actually really hard to do.
Hmm.
So when we're considering the daily full backups or so you're taking one backup a day and
Yep.
you can restore to yesterday. So you're basically saying RPO is 24 hours. Yeah. So
Yes.
worst case scenario, we lose 24 hours. Yeah.
Yep.
That's easy. You have two backup filers. One is online, you dump everything in, the other one is offline and is not
Yep.
accessible. Yeah. And the way we did it at first was enabling and disabling switch ports.
Hmm.
And then someone with electronic skills actually built a physical switch that disconnected the network cable.
Okay.
Because someone said, what if the ransomware hacks the switch first and then,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's how
I'm
far
like,
do you go with that story of being
yeah,
making it safe, right? Yeah.
we had someone who wanted to build that switch, so
Of course. Why
let's
not?
build it. It's fine. I would not have gone that far because it's like if ransomware understands your switch, it's easy to find the guy who did it because he's working for you. Because
Hmm.
there's just no way that a ransomware is that clever yet. Give it 10 more
As far as
years,
we know.
and yeah, the difference. A, they need to know the switch ports. B, there's a whole story. It's not that easy. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So, but again, with full backups, it's easy. You have the two systems, and you basically
Yep.
flip-flop between them. Yeah. Everything is filled. If you make it clever, one is in one data center, the other one is in the other data center. So you also have the two locations. Or if you don't like data centers anymore, you put half the Monday backups into AWS, the Tuesday backups you put into Google. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and your systems run on Azure. Yeah. So you're 100%, you can lose 2 out of 3 and you're still good to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
But once you need to get closer from the RPO, then it gets really hard to do. Because, okay, let's say with SQL, we have the option of taking log backups every couple of minutes, but you
Yep.
cannot flip the system every couple of minutes. Yeah. I mean, you can do it if you only have one server that backups to one pair of backup filers, then you can play this online, offline all the time. But even
Hmm.
then, the chances are that when you switch every 5 minutes, that the ransomware will encrypt the one part in the first 5 minutes and the next part in the other 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yep.
So for me, coming up with a solution for doing the keeping the logs also in a ransomware safe mode is something where I'm not 100% comfortable that whatever I came up with so far is actually working in every situation. I mean, yes, I will not guarantee that the very last backup might still be accessible because at some point I have to write it. So that means I have to have
Yeah.
access to wherever I write it to. And that means
Mhm.
ransomware can also access it eventually. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thing is, but even the one before that, getting it off into a different place, is a tricky thing. It's easy to assume. It's easy to do when you assume that the backup file share, the server that hosts the backup file share, and it doesn't matter if it's some appliance or some machine that has a file share, it's the same thing. Yeah. It
Yep.
just one has a nice little box around it. The other one is a regular server. Yeah. People don't understand that the storage system is a file server.
Yes.
Nothing
Yeah.
more, nothing less. Yeah. It takes a bunch of
Exactly.
hard drives and gives you a file share just in form of a drive, but it's the
Yep.
same thing. Yeah. It's just a different layer. So having if I assume that the device that hosts the file share is not affected, I can do it because I can have dual home networks in two separate networks. And that means I
Mhm.
write on one side and then I copy out on the other side.
Yes.
That means whatever is out there can encrypt whatever is here, but cannot hop to the next stage. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can copy it over there, but that's fine. I take an encrypted and or a corrupted file and move it over, but I'm not destroying anything that's on the next server. The
No,
problem is
exactly.
that machine itself gets infected. That does not help. So the question is, how many layers would you have to build till you say the next one is? What I came up with is I did two, and one of them was Windows based and the other one was Linux based, assuming that a virus would only run off one of the two operating systems.
Sure, but is it not a case of if the endpoint you're talking to, like maybe it's the type of the storage or system that's being offered to you, like an S3 bucket.
Yeah.
You're talking to an endpoint rather than I know it's a file server in the background, but the way you talk to it is, here's a file, and maybe you've got a secure connection between endpoints that cannot be impersonated. So like if you're backing up to a SQL Server database to a URL, you've registered the SQL Server service account with its endpoint to the endpoint of the Azure
Mhm.
Backup endpoint. Then all that can travel is the bytes from the SQL Server service into an endpoint. There is no, as far as I understand it, there is no way that a ransomware infected SQL Server VM talking to that endpoint could transfer the virus itself. I could be wrong.
Yes. So with S3, the thing is S3 is immutable. So whatever you can
Mm-hmm.
only write, you cannot
Yeah.
update. Yeah.
Yes.
So if you update, what it does in the background, it keeps your old version and stores the new version. So that means if ransomware would encrypt that, it's again comes in and would have a version of the old file, and then the encrypted one would sit on top. That if you just read and says latest version, you get the corrupt one. If you say give me the version before, it would ping it. Again,
Yeah.
that assumes that the device that holds the S3 data is not affected.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
But then,
So
if you're doing like if that's effectively, as I would understand it, the air-gapped backup option, because you
yeah,
can't touch the thing that's there. For
yeah.
example, a hosted S3 inside Azure in AWS, you have to
Mhm.
assume that Amazon and Microsoft are doing their homework and only offering clean systems. At some point, you've got to give up that trust. If you wanted to run it yourself, then you can run a server in a completely different data center. Again, there's the assumption that there's nothing going on in that data center. Um,
Yeah.
and there is only so far that you can go, I guess. Maybe using different technologies, like you said, block level replication of
Mhm.
storage can get around at least the transfer of infection. But if the file itself is already encrypted, then you're just replicating encrypted files.
No,
That's useless.
To having a system where once a file is written, it's guaranteed that it cannot be corrupted after it's written. Like the write once,
Yeah.
the warm devices that existed many years ago and then became unpopular. Something like this. And yes, S3 is a solution for that. The only problem I have with S3 is the size limit. Larger databases have a very big problem to get backed up to S3 because there is a limit how big an S3 blob can be and how many S3 blobs you can stitch together to make a file.
Yep.
I think it's somewhere around 27 terabytes. And unfortunately,
this just gives reference to the sizes you're working with, right?
Yeah. And that is per file. And if you have databases that get very close to that limit, you don't want to use that technology because one day you know you're going to hit the limit, and you can call Amazon as much as you want. They're not going to change the S3 specification for you. Yeah. And Microsoft did some workarounds to increase some of the limits because in the beginning the limit was way smaller. So they compromised, and Microsoft put pressure on S3 to actually change some of the limits. But it's still there's a size limit, while on a regular file share there's no size limit. I mean, there's still size limits, but they are so ridiculously large that I think it's 256 petabytes per file or something. Yeah. That's larger than a SQL database can be. So
not a problem just now.
Yeah. No, I mean, Microsoft has to think about it at some point.
Of course. 64
I think it's
kilobytes used to be the
petabytes.
largest, right?
I think the maximum size of a database can be 512 petabytes or something.
Something like that, yeah.
And that's not that far away from what people are doing. Yeah.
That's true. But then the question as well, that sort of size is, I would question, do you really need all of that inside a SQL Server?
Yeah. But again,
that's a whole different discussion, right?
With Microsoft needing about 10 to 12 years to implement changes, you have to start thinking today about stuff like this. Yeah.
For sure.
So
yeah.
I reported the missing zero data loss feature in database mirroring in 2004, and in 2017, so 13 years later, Microsoft finally implemented it.
Perfect.
Yeah, so it took 13 years to make one tiny little change, and because they immediately agreed, oh yeah, we made a boo-boo there by not having the third mode, because synchronous doesn't mean zero data loss.
No.
If the secondary dies first, the primary just continues as if nothing happens. And again, if you go for multiple failures, more than one server can fail.
Right, better late than never, right?
Yeah. So thinking about size limits, or the same thing is that the limit of 64 backup files per database is also becoming an issue, because there are cases where you can't back up certain databases on external drives anymore. Because external drives have currently a size limit of that many terabytes, and times 64 is that many petabytes. And yeah, so, and that one is harder to fix. Going above 64 backup files is not just changing a config thing.
No.
That requires operating system changes. That doesn't neither work on Linux nor on Windows. It also, if you notice, like, no query ever uses more than 64 CPUs.
No, indeed.
Yeah, I mean, very few people have machines where this is actually an issue. But an individual query, so if you have the largest data warehouse, it will only use 64 cores at a time, which is usually enough.
Point, right? Then you can design a system and say that will be enough, and it's never enough, right? It used to be that 64 kilobytes was what Microsoft thought was enough for everybody, right? So I can imagine at some point that 64 CPU limit will be lifted, the 64 backup endpoints will be lifted, but it's a question of who needs them. And if it's just you, Thomas, I'm afraid that's never going to get fixed.
No, I'm just usually there like 5 to 10 years before the majority of people
Exactly.
is there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
when I worked with 64 cores in 2008 and found a lot of issues when you have more than 64 cores, that was great. So Microsoft had enough time. Now it's really hard to find a CPU that has less than 64 cores.
Now you're just showing off.
No, I mean, look at the latest generation. They all have
No,
like
this is true.
100. Yeah. So, and
Yeah.
turn hyper-threading on and you're suddenly at a lot of threads. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yes, you can still buy like 16 core CPUs or so, but smaller, it's really not that easy.
No,
Not talking
no, it's true.
desktop, but when you buy servers, yeah.
Root service. Yeah, this is true. Yeah.
Tell me because clients are screaming because of licensing costs. No, we need a one core machine, yeah, running at 200 gigahertz, uh, much cheaper.
Yeah.
But yeah, but as you can see, for doing point in time backups in a secure way is not that easy, yeah. Or
Well,
even writing at multiple locations. Yeah. I mean, the SQL backup command has this option to write to multiple locations, which is also something I criticized with Microsoft for many years, and they're not going to do anything about it because it's like no priority, because that option doesn't work as you would expect it. Like, okay, I write my backup to 3 different locations. If one of them fails, I still have 2 good ones. No. If one location fails, the whole backup fails.
all fail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're basically just reducing the chances of a successful backup by 66.7%.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I still use it, but it's annoying that it's not actually behaving as you would like it to behave. Because
Yeah.
again, with full backups, I can help myself with doing a copy-only backup to a different location or something in
Yeah.
between
Sure.
or something. But log backups, there's just one log stream. Yeah. If they took away the capability of taking log backups without resetting the log chain. They
Mm-hmm.
took that
Mm-hmm.
away, which is kind of a good thing because people misused it to truncate the log with no backups. But there was an option to backup log without log, which
Mm-hmm.
basically took a log backup without logging the operation of having done a log backup, which basically gave you a second copy of the transaction log. Uh,
But it's just ridiculous. Basically, you need a way
yeah,
to
yeah.
do like parallel writes. And if one fails, who cares? It sucks, but don't kill it all. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not yet. Maybe I mean I'm not stopping on advocating for it at Microsoft, but I've given up hope on this one because
Well, I think it pushes a question towards what do you need? And again, back to backups are not really useful on their own. If people are moving more and more towards the platform as a service solutions of
yeah,
SQL Server, for example, then the need directly to be involved and care about backups disappears more and more.
yeah,
Because again, also the people don't care if it's a SQL Server or Postgres or Oracle. They need a relational engine end.
yeah,
And they only need that because their system needs to store the data somewhere. Nobody truly cares if it's a SQL Server, if it's 2025, 2022, SQL 2012. They don't care. They just need a database. End of story. And it's the same with the backups. They don't really need to care about it. They want to know my system's available enough and I can restore if things go wrong, but in a pretty undefined way because people don't spend the time to say, I need to be able to back up or restore from 3 weeks ago at 4:05 in the afternoon. Super rare for that to happen. It's usually, like you
yeah.
said, the audit comes through and says, we need a copy of the database from 2 years ago in January.
Mhm.
And if you've got a good setup, then you just go, okay, there's the file, happy days. With a platform as a service, you can do the same. You just say archive things for the next 5 years or 8 years or 7 years or whatever, and they do, and it's there, and you just trust you're paying for it to work. But again,
Yeah.
trust and verify.
Yeah, the problem what I have with all the service providers I checked, and that includes the major three and a couple of smaller ones, they're actually doing no backups at all. by
No.
my definition of what a backup is. What they're doing is they're doing storage snapshots. That means if the underlying storage architecture has any kind of failure, you're losing your primary data and your backups at the same time.
Mhm.
It's like
But it,
having a disk and taking the backup to the same disk.
yeah, yeah.
It while it might be physically a different disk, logically it's the same disk.
Mm,
Because my definition is backup has to be on a different system, as different as possible. So if your primary database is on SSDs or the NVMe drives, then your backup should be on rotating spindles. And the second backup should be on tapes, and the third one
Yep.
should be on in chiseled into stones
Yeah,
or
punch
something.
cards, right? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Whatever different and as far away as possible. And the problem is with all these snapshot thingies, it's yes, it's convenient. Yes, it takes only milliseconds or seconds to do that. Yeah. But the problem is A, recovery.
Yeah. Again,
Okay, it's the service provider's problem, but I see it in local data centers when people are taking storage snapshots, and then they have 30 databases on a server, and then they need to restore one of them, and the storage team can only like swap out the
all or
drive
nothing,
with
right?
all of them.
Hmm.
So you would
Yeah, yeah.
lose not just one database of data, you would lose all of them. So then they snapshot it back to a different system, and then it's insane. It takes forever, and the convenience during the backup phase is way outweighed by the inconvenience of when you actually need partial restores. Yeah.
Yep.
Also just parts of the data back. Um, and the second one is, yeah, if as long as there's not an actual copy of the data on some other system, and with system I mean storage system, it's that's not a backup yet. Yeah.
No.
And if you have distributed storage, which all the cloud is what the cloud is using, that just means the problem is there's no way to put it somewhere else
No.
unless that cloud provider actually has two completely separated storage environments, which nobody has because nobody really cares.
No.
There is
But
no actual backup.
But the point being there, it's a sliding scale of who's responsible for what and how much you're willing to give up, right? The old slide deck I had about SQL on VMs all the way through to as a service was the pizza analogy. Either you buying a pizza in the supermarket that's frozen, all the way through to making it yourself and the different steps between there, going to a restaurant or having it delivered to your home. You're giving up certain parts of the job from making the pizza to having it on your plate. And you have to accept that you're giving up control. It's the same thing with the backup part, right? If you run the VMs yourself on your own machines in your own data center with your own storage account, or sorry, storage system, then you have maximum control over everything, and you can decide: do I do storage snapshots? Do I use an appliance for deduplication? Which, side note, also terrible for restores. Um, do you use native backups? Do you use a third-party tool to do backups? All of these things have positives and negatives, and everybody needs to recognize those when making those decisions, which goes all the way back to how does it fit into the entire system? Can I afford to have a team of DBAs, sysadmins, and storage admins, or do I need to entrust all of that to a platform as a service? Also, just checked in the chat. Can I ask when we restore backup for Azure database, how to know the backup was data of which months? Ah, um, well, I would say file timestamps, but that's also lies because a file timestamp is just when it was created in Azure, right? Naming conventions, things like that will help, but I think probably the internal of a backup can only be confirmed when you restore it to know when the last data was changed. That's all I could say to that point. I don't know if you have opinions, Thomas, or maybe David as well.
I'm question to Azure is none of my clients uses databases in the cloud. It's just It's not the companies that call me. I'm not known
No.
for doing that. I'm often involved in a phase where they think about it, and then we do the
Hmm.
math, and then they figure out it's much, much cheaper to do it on-prem, uh,
Yep.
or in a hybrid way. But what I've done a lot is where we have the databases in a data center that is cloud adjacent. There are
Hmm.
certain data center provider that figured out it's a good idea to build a data center across the street of the big ones. The
Yep.
most famous one is Ashburn, Virginia. It's the only town on the planet where all four uh, cloud providers are like within a mile from each other. So
Okay.
you have zero
Okay.
latency between them. That means
Yeah.
you have Azure, Google, and Amazon there, and you have an Equinox data center top of the line where you can put your own stuff. So you
Okay.
put one or two racks of databases in your own place, and then you use the cloud for the rest. And that
Nice.
turned out to be really, really efficient and effective.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because there was no speed limit on the databases, and there was no speed limit on how fast you can spin up application servers. Yeah. And it was even funny because you can outbid the three providers because you connect to all three of them and you ask them, okay, I need 10,000 VMs of that size. You have 10 seconds to give me an offer. And then all three offers come back. You choose the cheapest price and you deploy because it shouldn't matter where
It
your
doesn't matter.
stuff
Yeah.
runs.
Hmm.
For making sure that you know which backup is which is I have a whole concept of how to name backups because it's evolved over the years and I made my awesome mistakes. And the most famous one, what I learned is you can't use the database name in your backup because database names might not what you expect them to be.
Hmm.
I can read you the most famous database name I came ever across, and there is no way of changing it. The
Select.
database is named C colon backslash program space files space bracket on x86 bracket closed backslash Microsoft space Visual Studio space backslash installer.
You
Perfect.
can you
They
can name a
that,
database as an emoji, and I think that might break your restore script as well.
that actually, if you back up to a Windows file share, does not.
That one
If you
does.
back up to a Linux file share, it does. Windows file share works. The problem is backslashes, colons, and stuff like this. So if you have a file name as a database name, because the install script of that magic software messed up the database name and the file name. So the file name is the actual database name somewhere in the default folder where databases are created,
Uh,
and the database is named with like the install
Yeah.
thing. So the
That's
problem is
terrible.
if you try to write down that file name, in any file system, you get back that is not a valid file name. So you
Sure. Sure.
have that. What I usually do is I have a field somewhere in my metadata that I have can override the database name with a backup name for the database. Normally, I default to the backup database name. I do a sanity check by replacing the things, and if it's too long or something, then I print a warning instead of failing backups. But there is a field in my metadata where I have an alternate name. If it's null,
Hmm.
just use the database name. If you put something in, use that.
Hmm.
Um, and I usually put the year, month, day, hour, minute, and second of when the backup starts in it. I code in it which type of backup it is. And then I code in the file number of how many files of that backup. So if I back
Yeah.
up to 10 files, it's 01, 02, 03 off 10 off 10. So if I find a single file, I can fully reconstruct the restore from that. Yeah.
Yep.
And the other one is why it's this order, backup name, then the date, and then the other one is so that if I sort it alphabetically in the file Explorer, I can grab the file names
Yep.
in order for whatever I need. So two backups never interleave. It's the worst thing if you have two backups that interleave each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you have to figure out which files are which, and you always click on the wrong ones. Again, 4 a.m. in the morning, decision-making points. Thing is. I don't know if in Asia you can affect which name they use for the backup files. I hope they have something like the dates in it.
I'm
The
not.
other one is you can always in regular backups, and again, I don't know how Asia backups allow this. There's a way of restore header only, where you can
Hmm.
just get the information of the backup out of a regular backup, which basically tells you from when, where this backup is, all the information you need to again construct a restore command out of it. It lists you all the file groups and everything that you need.
Yeah.
Yes. One more thing I forgot is I also encode after the database name, I encode the environment where the backup is from. Because there is sometimes someone needs a backup of a database from development or QA,
Yep.
and I don't want them to override or get in any conflict with my production environment backups.
Yep. That makes sense.
So but it could be. I mean, there's why not in a development I would take a backup, do something, try it out, and then have a chance to restore. I would never stop someone from doing that. But it is an important thing to name. As with everything, you have to have a plan how to name your stuff that will work for all cases. Yeah. And yes, yeah. Well, we all know if you ever worked with SharePoint, your database names will have GUIDs in them. Yeah. Again, GUIDs don't work in a file system. So you have to have a way of dealing with that. There are systems that create new databases every day. So you have to have like they start like every day or every month or every year they start a new set of databases. Yeah. I one company we had accounting 2025, accounting 2024, accounting 2023. It went
Yep.
all back to accounting what was it? 1990 something.
Wow. Okay.
Kevin, for Azure SQL Database specifically, you may not have a lot of the options that were discussed here.
No.
It's not the most fun because it's supposed to be a managed platform. The most bulletproof way that you can possibly envision here is to quite literally start getting into the data and look for anything with a date and time column. That or if there's events, some sort of history that you can look for events in the Azure SQL Database logs on the platform, on the Azure platform, look to see when was the restore performed. You still don't know the point in time that it was restored to. So you may be stuck kind of sifting through data to figure out dates and times.
If it's if it's a mission critical thing is you can have a very, very small table
Yeah,
with one row and one column, and then you have a job that every minute updates the date and time in there.
yeah, piece of cake.
And
No,
then when you restore, that's the first place you look because you know you have data up to at least somewhere around that date and time. Yeah.
So
And
s-
having some
the
job
now go on.
that does that every minute should not be yes. You
So I
might
mean,
not even need a job. You can use this on start stored procedure that on startup starts up and does a wait for in an infinite loop.
yep,
Uh,
that's true. I mean, the way that you run, I'm assuming from the question you were meaning an Azure SQL database, so the fully managed version of the SQL database. You set up on the database itself exactly how long the data retention should be for backups and so on. So just in the background while Thomas was talking, I just jumped into my own like test environment to look at an Azure SQL DB we've set up, and you have the option to do a point in time recovery. So this is the thing we were talking about earlier on, and on our test system, we've got, I'm allowed to, today is the 18th of June, I'm allowed to go back 7 days for a point in time recovery. So this is any time between now and minus 7 days. And it basically what it's doing is running the database in full recovery mode and running regular log backups in the background so that I can then say, I need to restore 3 days ago at 10 past 3 in the afternoon. And it will then choose the database backup that it needs to be able to reconstruct a database for me with that exact point in time. I cannot look into that backup externally, if that makes sense. All I can say is take my test database, AdventureWorks, restore it flip for me to the point in time I've chosen. And what it will do is then spin up a new Azure SQL DB using that backup with that point in time. At which point you can then say, that was the state of my database at that time of day, month, year, 3 days ago. But the contents is only then readable. So that's when you would be able to say, okay, I actually trust this backup. As it stands, I don't believe you can even access the backup files themselves from Azure SQL DB. It's fully managed in the background. You just tell it through the GUI or through PowerShell, restore to this point in time, and it just takes care of everything for you. I hope that's answered your question, Kevin. If it hasn't, please chuck something again into the chat to let us know. Okay, so that was a sidebar. Did you have the next topic you wanted to get to, Thomas?
One thing for long-term retention. So keeping backups several months, several years, forever. The longest I had to implement is 30 years. And in about 2 years, that is going to be over because then the system is 36 years old and will not be used anymore.
30 years, as insane.
They
Have
used it for
they?
3 or 4 years after they bought it, and then they
Yeah.
still have to guarantee that they can restore the data, and every year have to sign off that the data can still be read and done. It's a nice 10-minute job
So
every year that they pay well for, so I don't mind it. But it's 30 years. It's pharmaceutical, everything that is with human lives. If human lives depends on the
okay.
data, it's 30 years in Austria at
So
least.
and what do you use for storage?
They over the years that changed a lot. So that
Okay.
thing got migrated. The database, that the nice thing is the database doesn't have to run anymore. So
Okay.
the application doesn't have to run. They just need the data. So
Mm-hmm.
what we do is we always move to the newest version of SQL Server and upgrade the database and keep, once the upgrade is done, I take a new backup and the data hasn't changed in 28 years.
Oh, so what they want is the system. They don't want you to have an archival copy that's 30 years old. They want just access to the data that is now 30 years old.
They don't, but the regulators that audit them require them to have it. They will nuke that system the minute the 30 years are over.
No, I get
Yeah.
that. What I mean is they don't care that they don't want to see a tape that's 30 years old with a
No,
file on it. They just want
no.
the data that is 30 years
Yeah,
old available
yeah,
somehow.
yeah,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
yeah. It's the based on today's standards, that database is a rounding error in the amount. It runs on a VM that would be considered tiny. Back then, it was like a full-blown server with its own storage array and external disks and all kinds of fancy stuff. Yeah. Today, that
Mm,
fits. It would fit on your smartwatch probably. Yeah.
yeah, sure, sure.
But it's the problem is that once you keep stuff that many years, 5, 6 years, 7 years is usually not a problem. Because you
Hmm.
can take a 5 year, 6 year old backup and restore it in current SQL Server. Yeah. So
Yep.
Microsoft right now guarantees SQL 2008 backups can still be restored on what is 2022. Yeah.
Hmm.
You can still, and they guarantee. Practically, you can go back to 7.0. You will have encountered several issues
Yep.
because after you restore everything that is before 2005, you have to rebuild all indexes because the storage format of indexes
Storage data
changed,
changed.
and
Yep.
that doesn't get corrected by the restore. And I'm pretty sure that there will be edge cases where it would not work anymore. But again, but still, if you have older data, like my example, that original thing that was running on SQL 4.21. Yeah. So 2 kilobyte page sizes and all the good stuff back then. Yeah. So a backup from then wouldn't be useful. I would have to have a SQL 7.0 first to do the migration from the SQL 4 point something version to 7.0, and that was basically an export import kind of feature. Yeah, it was a special tool that they had back then to migrate databases, which basically just it basically BCP'd the data out and BCP'd it back in, and then created all the
Yeah.
metadata around it. Yeah, but worked fine. Yeah, but you have to keep that in mind. Yeah. It's so everything over 10 years, I'm always like, be very careful. We need a plan how to actually get data from 10 years ago back. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it might, the second thing is it might be a tape that the current tape drive can't read anymore.
exactly. That was my
Yeah.
point. Was like, how are you
Or a
keeping a
hard
tape
drive
machine from
that there
then?
is no connector anymore. Yeah. Uh, I have a bunch of SCSI drives lying around with files on them. Yeah, I could probably find on eBay some SCSI drive, but none
Yeah,
of my current machines has a SCSI controller that can
no,
do 8-bit SCSI anymore. Yeah.
exactly.
And the older XT or whatever interfaces that were before that don't work. But that's still in the range of 30 years. And
Yeah, exactly.
healthcare is not the only place with 30 years. There's certain financial stuff is also 30 years.
Hmm.
And then there's certain stock exchange related data where it clearly says forever. So
Oh wow.
there is no, you have to keep that data, like there is no, it's not a large amount of data, but it's certain things that you cannot ever like not have a backup of. It's
Hmm.
even if you stop using it, you have to keep it around forever. It's like archive in paper form that you documents that you cannot get rid of, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
should not get rid of, yeah, yeah. And so the problem is with over 10 years, one way you can solve this is by after like you say, okay, every 8 years or so, we restore all the databases and then we take new backups with whatever current technology we have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But that might invalidate some immutability requirements that you have because
Exactly,
technically it's
exactly.
no longer the backup from back then. Yeah. One company I worked for, they had a very different approach to that. All their databases, but that was because they did all their stuff homegrown, so they could do that. All their databases were completely time series. So they never changed a value in a table. They always inserted a new row that became the
Appended. Yeah,
primary row. So they don't have long-term archival at all because they say the backup
it's
from
all there.
today has
Yeah.
all the data of the last 30 years in it.
Hmm.
Um, You need to know how that value was on that date. We can tell you from here. Are these
Hmm.
tables getting bigger and bigger? Yes. But on the other hand, they don't have to keep 30 years or 20 years or 7 years of backups lying around. They keep exactly 1 month for recovery reasons. Yeah.
Sure, sure.
So as again, it comes to understand what you have and what you actually need. Yeah, because keeping data for even for 7 years is expensive. Yeah.
Yes.
Say like you take one backup um, every month that you keep. Let's say you have a terabyte backup files. Your backup is about a terabyte. That's 12 terabytes a year times seven. That's almost 100. That's 100 terabytes that you have to pay in the first 7 years, it gradually gets more expensive, but then you have to keep paying for that amount.
Yeah,
And we all know data gets just bigger and not smaller.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's not going to
So
be cheaper over the long run. That's true.
And again, you would be surprised when you go in a big enterprise or something where you have thousands of databases, and then it turns out only like 50 of them actually need long-term archival. And the other ones are just nobody cares. They're not of regulated stuff. Thing is, well, again, I'm a fan of one size fits all. If I can have one backup restore solution that covers
Sure.
everything, it's great, but not if it wastes money. Yeah.
Yeah,
If I have 99 databases that need long-term revival and I have one that doesn't, yeah, that one gets the long-term archival as well because
sure, sure.
it's way too complicated to exclude one. But if I only need 60 out of 20,000, uh, yes, that's worth the effort of having two different systems. And
That's
again,
true.
the owner of the data, which is not the DBA, which is someone in the business, needs to understand that, and that's the person who makes the decision. No, we don't need backups. Yeah,
Yeah, this is true.
and or long-term retention. Yeah.
So there's a
And
quick question in the chat about
yeah,
the 30 years old data that you have to keep around. What are the repercussions if you fail to do that?
They might lose Federal Drug Association approvals or something.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it might not actually, nobody cares about that data actually anymore. It's more like if the auditor finds a problem, they have like a dot in their like in Germany when you drive too fast, you get a dot on your driver's
Yep.
license.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have one of these dots, so when the next time they need an approval for something, they look, oh, you have a lot of dots there, so
Yeah.
we're gonna make your life thing easier. Um,
It's just not
in the
worth the
financial
hassle to
industry,
lose.
if you don't have the backups, it's very clear you pay a fine. And it's very simple math. Is it cheaper to keep the backups or is it cheaper to pay the fine?
Yep.
The problem is you never know, and you have to understand, do you pay the fine once or do you
Hmm.
have to pay the fines for each occurrence? So, for
Yeah.
example, if you need to keep it 30 years and after 15 years you lose the data, do I pay once and then I'm good? Or every year in every audit, do I pay again? Uh,
Yeah.
so it's again, these are legal backups. This is
But it's
yeah,
also a case of it's not your or my job to make that decision.
yeah,
Somebody else says, do it this way, and we do it this way.
yeah,
And if then it's still wrong, then again, it's not our problem.
yeah. No, it's we do it as efficiently and as cost effective as we can, but
Yep.
if it's a requirement, it's a requirement. It's
Yep.
just it's cost of doing business. Yeah. If
Yeah. Exactly.
the regulator says you need to have 30 years of backups because human life depended on your product, um, and people have 30 years to go to court to make your life miserable, you're gonna keep it for 30 years. And
Yeah.
it's very simple. Do you keep it for 30 years in 1 minute? No. Uh,
Yeah. Completely true. Yeah. I mean,
it's
that,
also one
like you
of the
say, it's
biggest problems that I see is that people don't have a process to actually get rid of their backups once they are no longer needed.
yes. We've run into that so many times. Yeah, I mean, you've come from sports betting in the past. One of our clients is also in a online casino business, and their a major concern of theirs was that their data was exploding, and it was purely because certain tables were not being cleaned up. And from an operational DBA side, I want to throw as much data away as possible because I don't want to manage it.
Yep.
So it's a question of how quickly can we delete this data, remove it from our systems because it's dead weight that I'm carrying around. It lands in my backups. It slows down queries. It causes me problems with all sorts of availability situations and resource usage.
Yep.
Throw it away as fast as possible. Where we've help this client reduce from billions of rows down to tens of millions. It takes and that's a whole other challenge is also deleting data in a safe way that doesn't cause side effects in the business.
Yes, because
Because transaction logs fill up. You cause blocking, locking, all sorts of craziness where we've had third parties running an ERP system for a client of ours who've said, "Oh, we figured out a way to clean up this audit log table that we don't need. Just run this delete statement over 10 years worth of audit logs." Whoa! Take it in steps. Delete 10,000 rows and then start a loop to delete 10,000 rows. Don't just delete 10 billion rows. That's a terrible idea.
in a single transaction, and then
Yeah,
one day
exactly.
before the end, you fail over to the secondary side to recover them all
Exactly.
before deleting them again. Yep.
Yep. Yep.
No, it's oh yeah, nah. Keeping data small. I mean, the fastest way to restore data is to not have the data.
Yes.
Yeah. If your database is half the size, it will take you half the time to recover it. It's very simple math.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science. It's the smaller your database, the easier you can handle it.
Yep.
Backups are faster, backups are cheaper, restores are faster, all operations, maintenance, check this, check DB, everything is faster if it's smaller. And
Yep.
it's so hard to convince data hoarders
Mm-hmm.
to let go. Yeah. I
Yes.
mean, that's where a data warehouse or an archive server comes in very handy. You copy it over there, you park it there, you back
Yep.
it up once a month or something because the data hasn't changed in years, so it's not a big deal. But from your operational databases, get rid of as much as you can. It's not always that
Yes.
easy. If for whatever reason the operational data needs last year's data or something, that's fine. But usually, like 5, 6 year old data has no practical use case anymore. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And this is where some systems come in where you have like a new database every year. So it's
Hmm.
very simple. When you have a bookkeeping system, you connect to your database by logging in. I'm like, I'm working on the fiscal year 2025.
Yep.
I don't need any other data. Yeah. At the end of the year, you import whatever leaps over from one year into the next. But after that, it's a self-contained database again. And if I need to look up something from 5 years ago, I connect to the database from 5 years ago. If we need to
Yep.
delete this data or move it to another server, it's super easy and separated. But this
Yep.
is
Yep.
accounting software, and they learned that because they had the problem with thousands of clients. So they implemented it once. It's the bigger problem in this case is more like the homegrown software
Yeah. Yeah.
or the third-party software that is usually working in small companies, and then a big company tries to use it, and they never had the problem of actually having like a lot of data.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Run into that
And so
many, many times.
yeah, if you have 10 customers, it doesn't matter if you delete the data or not. If you have 10 million customers, it makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
It's in the gambling company, it's like in the first month when they started their business, they had two bad conclusions in the whole month.
Yeah.
When I left the company, we had peak hours with 500,000 per second.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Slight
So
difference.
yes. But on the other hand, someone says we need to archive data, and we're like, uh, doesn't really help us because we have exponential growth.
Yeah.
So if we delete the first 10 years of data, about an hour later, we have more data than we had before the deletion. And it's going to be like a 6 months project to figure out how to delete that data. So if you have exponential growth, there's no point in deleting old and archiving data. If you have consistent data, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like yeah, if you add another year, you get rid of one year. You add another year, you get rid of one year. So you have a sliding window, keeps your database at a certain size, or hopefully your business grows a little bit, so it gets a little bit bigger every year, but it's not exploding. But once
No.
you have already exploding data, it doesn't matter how you can't, whatever you delete at the end, you're adding in a fraction of the time at the beginning. Yeah. So
Sure.
not always archiving a good idea, but in general, yes, very good. So have a plan how to archive, have a plan how to truncate or delete or remove data that is no longer needed. And that's also a
Yep.
legal thing. If you don't have data, nobody can compel you to give them that data. Yeah. If you have to keep it for 7 years, yes, keep it for 7 years. But again, don't keep it for 7 years and 1 minute.
Yes.
Ask Microsoft how their email policy changed after the the big lawsuit they had with the European Union, where they kept every email from the beginning of the company, and now
Yeah.
every day they ask you, "Can we delete all your emails?"
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's just a thing. Yeah, I mean, most companies that work now, like they have a policy, emails after a year, they're gone. There's
Hmm.
if I had like I needed a couple of emails like with important information in it. I had to have a reminder every at the end of the year to email them to myself again. So I had a fresh copy, and then they could delete the old one because
Store them somewhere else. You've got to use the right system for the right data as well, right?
yes, but it was so convenient to have it there.
Ah, there we go. The lazy human again.
Yeah, one of the few things that you could access from many points and not outside the company, like remote email on your phone.
Yeah, of course, of course. I get it, but this is
Yeah,
how
yeah.
we
No, no.
misuse systems. I know
Oh yeah,
somebody at my previous employer, we had an email box size limit.
yeah.
It did not include the deleted items folder in Outlook, so they
Yeah.
had something stupid like 15 gigabytes of data in deleted items and never emptied it. until someday, I don't know what happened, they implemented a policy of emptying the deleted items automatically. So they lost all of this really critical information. It was like, yeah, I kept it in the deleted items folder. It's like, that's not what that folder is for. Yeah,
Yeah. No.
misusing
So
systems.
speaking of strange things, I think the craziest thing I ever did once I stored full backups in TempDB. Uh, because I needed then to use a linked server to transport them through a firewall where I could only open one port, which was 1433. So I could initialize replication on the other side with from backup. So I bulk inserted it into TempDB, then copied it over through TempDB to the other side, and then dumped it out with BCP again and restored,
That's
and it worked.
crazy. That
That
just
and the
reminded
other
me.
one is
I saw somebody blog posted today. Most mentioned it on LinkedIn at least, of doing something exactly like that, but with SQL Server managed instance, because you can't obviously look at the underlying machine of managed instance. They wanted to see if they could send files in to be able to run CLR, and they did exactly as you've just said. They bulk inserted, and it landed then into
yeah.
a blob inside it. Like, what the hell? Really creative ways of hacking into machines. Well done.
The other one was there's a feature where ex you can have a blob exposed as a file in a file share
Hmm.
inside
Yeah,
SQL Server.
yeah.
Yeah, if you create a database with just one database, with one table in it, and you expose that blob as a file share, and then you build an AG to another data center, and you store your log backups, they get transported to the other data center automatically.
That's really clever.
Yeah, I mean, it drives Microsoft nuts in a support case, but it
Of
works. The
course.
only problem is you have to do log backups very quickly because they cannot be more than 2 GB. Because a blob
Ah,
cannot exceed 2 GB. Uh, and it doesn't work with file stream. So if you do this with file stream, and it has to be the other one. But it works. And
be creative. I like it.
yeah, but it's that's the point where you're like, yeah, we should probably use this till we have a solution that is like sustainable and supportable and thing. But sometimes it's all about you have to work with what you have. And
Exactly that. And I think a lot of it is experience as well through IT, through doing working long enough, you pick up some weird and wonderful ideas. So for
yeah.
creativity in a solution of an outage, I love the story. Maersk, it's the company that sends those huge containers on ships around the world. They're the
Mhm.
biggest one in the world, and they got hit before ransomware was a thing. They got hit by something similar. It was one of these bugs that killed Windows networks, and it took out their entire global infrastructure. They lost everything, and they were trying to fix it. And they had Microsoft and one of the major consulting companies in the world helping them try and reconstruct their entire AD. They'd lost AD, lost everything, until they realized one of their offices in Africa, somewhere like Nigeria. I don't know exactly the country, but it was one of their satellite offices, had lost internet just before this virus had hit their entire infrastructure. So this one office still had a secondary copy of their AD. So they scrambled and called and got in touch with them somehow to say, don't turn the internet back on. Don't reconnect because you're safe. The rest of us is not safe. And they took the disks out of their domain controller in their office. The person in their office there did not have a visa to enter Europe. So somebody from the European office had a visa to go to Morocco. They flew to Morocco, swapped disks in the airport, and then flew back and reconstructed from there. And that was like, oh my God, this is a MacGyver solution to a problem that you would generally never have. And it shows you have the offline air gapped backup scenario for exactly this sort of thing
They had it by accident.
by
And
accident.
my guess is now they have a solution where they do it on purpose. Yeah.
100%, right? I mean, there is also this idea of was it like you can now have a domain controller that's only read only? it
Yeah.
gets written to and it stays there and it won't be changed. It's like, sensible.
Yeah, but if the primary gets like the
If it
data
gets
on the
screwed
primary
up and
gets
it
corrupted, it will
propagates, for
replicate it
sure.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
cannot be attacked by itself, but
No.
it's the same problem as if you have a primary and a secondary, and someone writes ransomware that is SQL based, like
Yeah. It's going to
update.
replicate the
Yeah,
crap, right?
it's
Mm-hmm.
it's like an AG will not prevent you from a drop table. It
No.
will just a millisecond later drop the table on the other side, and no DBA is fast enough to pull that thing. Yeah.
Log shipping with a 20-minute delay. That's what you need.
Yes, or a 1 hour delay, 4 hour, and 8 hour delay.
Yes.
3 log shipping copies. And it's if anybody is interested, there's a recording of a SQL in 2008 Pass Summit where it explains exactly that, how to have zero data loss in 2008.
Yes.
The or as close as you can get to it. And part of that was to have multiple delayed log shippers in each data center. So we needed 12 copies of the data in total to get somewhere to zero data loss.
Perfect.
And yeah, in
Relatively cheap as well, right? Because log
it,
shipping, it's
it
just
again, it
backups,
depends
restores.
on yeah, it for that company, it didn't matter. Yeah. It's
That
the
too.
only time I worked for a company where I had an unlimited budget. And I will never ever do that again.
Because then there is no problem that should be unsolvable, right?
Exactly. And it's always your fault because normally you tell them, hey, we need 6 servers to do this, and then they give you three. And then something happens, and you're like, yeah, if we had the other three, we would have prevented it. Questionable if we actually would have prevented it, but at least the excuse
Sure.
is there.
Yeah.
If you just have unlimited budget, there is no excuse. It's like, oh, you could have bought 100 servers, we wouldn't care. Uh, and again, if you make about 100,000 euros a minute in money, you can spend some of that into your IT infrastructure.
Yeah. You effectively have unlimited budget. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't unlimited. It was unlimited within reason. That was the definition. Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
So if you could, and again, they wanted an explanation. Okay, so we can have like 5 minutes of data loss for $100,000, or we can have 1 minute of data loss for 10 million. And
Mm-hmm.
then they would make the decision, yeah, we go for the 10 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the business said it's worth doing, right? This is the
If
whole
I would
point.
have given them it's 100 million, they would probably said, no, let's stick with the 10 million. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's not go there. Yeah. But it was not that the typical problem where it's like, okay, I need at least $500 to make the backups happen. And then they give you 50 bucks Amazon voucher or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which gets you several terabytes these days, but
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But like you
if you
say,
know.
it's all to do with what the business needs, right? If they don't need it, then they don't need it, but they need to have
And
the
sometimes
choices.
you have to get clever. So, for example, many years ago, Hitachi sold a 1 terabyte hard drive for $79, not unreal USB hard drive, but it came with unlimited AWS backup storage.
Wow.
760 petabytes later, Amazon canceled the account.
Wow.
It was just a test. What does unlimited mean?
Yeah, no doubt. But that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yep.
I would certainly see how far I could go with that.
Yeah, we immediately got some free VM up there and let it produce. So we basically had a database with a terabyte on that VM, and every day we used the new encryption key to take the backups. And once the backup was done, new encryption key, new backup, so they could zero deduplication, zero anything, just see how much.
That's just evil, but also really cool.
It was like, how can I create as much data in the shortest amount of time to
Yeah.
figure out what unlimited means? Because there's always an asterisk, but
There is
not.
always a limit. Yeah, of course.
So
Of
now we know
course.
if we so now we knew if we stick with like 50 petabytes per account that we can buy for $70, it's a cheap way of keeping backups. And
True
of course, you
story.
should have more than one because
You
I'm
just
pretty
made
sure nowadays they would catch you much earlier. This was in the early days where they probably didn't have very, very good monitoring yet for
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
me.
Yeah.
But it's like don't give me something where you say it's unlimited unless you mean it. Yeah.
you just made my day with that one.
It was good. I mean,
Just
and
back up the
it
internet.
was
That's it.
hilarious. Then weeks later, Hitachi tried to sell us like one of their storage arrays, and we're like, "Hey, a terabyte is $79." Yeah, so that's the price point where we're starting here.
This is it. We've got
And they
700
really
petabytes
struggled
inside
in
of Amazon.
arguing why it should be more expensive on an array than in the regular. I'm like, you're making really good caterpillars, but
This is it.
and the fun
Stop
part
it.
is the arrays are actually not bad. It's just
No, no, no,
it, Europe is not the area for them. They don't have the service infrastructure in Europe.
no.
It's yeah, it's there on in a different part of the world. It's the same when you um try to get NEC servers. You can't buy them in Europe anywhere. They're great machines, but you can't buy them anywhere here. It's the other way around is Fujitsu, German product. Yeah, you can't buy them in the US.
No.
It's just some things are more local. Yeah, nothing.
That's it. Yeah.
Good. Let's see if there's anything else in my. I mean, the topic of thing is not even going into performance or so. I mean, it's important that backups are fast because while a backup is running, your system is kind of vulnerable because there are
Yeah.
certain things you can't do while a backup is running. Certain things you can do. Certain things you cannot do. And one thing you cannot do is you cannot truncate your log while the backup is running. So your transaction log must be able to handle all the transactions that come in while your backup is running. So if your backup takes 8 hours, you better be
Yep.
prepared to have 8 hours. You can still take log backups while you're doing this. Since 2005, in 2000, that was not possible. So in 2000, when you took a full backup, there were no log backups while you're taking the backup. That was
Mm.
like a super risky
Yeah.
thing. But nowadays you can take the log backups, but it will not truncate the log while the full backup, because the full backup contains a log backup of all the logs that are created while the full backup is running. And that also means the longer your backup runs, the longer it will take to restore because it has to churn through that whole log after restoring the pages and see if they need to
Yep.
fix anything. Yeah? So having fast backups, you are actually there's incentive to have fast backups because the faster you take your backup, the faster your restore will also go. And that's not just about the speed that you can pump through the disks or through the network or something. This is also the amount of work that has to be done in the last
Yep.
percent or in the last 5%. We all know restores go to 95% in a very steady pace. And then the last 5%, minutes,
Yeah.
hours, days.
It's the typical Microsoft percentages, right?
And this is also the reason why I try to avoid differential backups.
Hmm.
Because with a differential backup, you have that log apply with the differential again. So you have it twice basically. So the chances of having some stupid transaction in there that takes forever to churn through yeah. Absolutely don't do index rebuilds while taking backups. It's basically doubles the size of your backup, and it works, but it's a very bad idea. You can do check disk while doing backups. It will just affect performance, but it will not affect size or thing. But
You just
again, not a
want
good
the
idea.
backup to be done as fast as possible. Let it
Yes.
concentrate on that and then do the rest.
Yeah. It's also one of my favorite questions for DBAs when I hire them. Uh, Index rebuilds, update stats, check DB, and backup. In which order?
Haha. Good
There is
one.
no answer. There's just an
Well, no, there's
opinion
no
thing.
answer. This is true. It's a discussion more than about what they are for and when you should do them, right?
Hmm.
My favorite one is to appear at a new client who uses maintenance plans does index rebuilds, then index reargs, and then full stats rescans, and then a backup.
Yep. So basically have great data in your database and great statistics and metadata, then destroy it, and then make sure you have a backup of the bad version.
Yep.
No, it's the thing. So you want to do the backup first because you want to protect the data that you gathered during the day. But then you run the index rebuild, so you're basically having a backup of data that you can't use immediately. Yeah.
Yep.
So, okay, let's do the index rebuilds first. But do I want to check my database if it's okay before I take a backup or not? And again, it comes to what is the requirement? What is my thing? Yeah. It's clear doing them all at the same time is the worst idea.
Yep.
But which order? There's basically no correct answer. It just depends what you need. But it's interesting to see how people explain their thinking behind it.
So what's your opinion around doing things like backing up from a secondary in an availability group instead of from the primary?
So it can be convenient to save cross data center traffic. Yeah, it complicates the whole process massively. It works, so I got it to work. It's fine. My raw opinion is I must be able to take a backup of any system at any point in time during the day, and it cannot affect my operational stuff. I need that much reserves. Yeah. I'm not saying that I need to be able to take a compressed backup during the day. So I have this feature that I call an emergency backup that I take, for example, when I detect like a break in the log chain or something. It immediately triggers an emergency backup, which is a full backup uncompressed to the fastest location I can find in my metadata for that given server. Yeah. So with that said, it should not matter when you take your backups and from which location, because if you can't take a backup at any point in time, you have a bigger problem. Because that means also if you have an issue, you're running vulnerable for a long time. Yeah. But again, to on a daily basis save a lot of cross data center traffic, it might be an idea to take the backup wherever you want the physical thing to be. It will automatically remove differential backups from the equation because they don't work. If you do it to remove the load from the primary, so you have more capacity for queries, that's the wrong approach because that means you're so close to the ceiling already that you will bump into the ceiling multiple times a day. So I wouldn't do it for that. I would use it for saving terabytes of cross data center data that might be expensive, but not to unload load from the primary. Yeah.
Makes
And
sense.
if the secondary sits around and does nothing, why not take backups?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But doing it because the primary can't handle it, that's a bad approach because that also means that if you have to restore during the day, you can't do it because a restore takes as many resources as a backup. So you have the typical drop table. So you need to restore the database side by side, get the table back, and thing is that means if you can't take a backup, you can't do that during the day. That means your RPO is immediately at like at least 8-9 hours until close of business when it happens in the morning. Thing is, other than that, it works. Yeah.
That makes
I
sense.
would not do the new feature of continue that you can continue backups after failover. I have no system where it takes me more than 4 hours to take a full backup. So
yeah, it's for those cases where you have such a huge database that is just a requirement, right? I get it.
Yes,
It's
but
like
even the
resumable
hugest
index
database, you
maintenance.
can back up in less than 4 hours. It just, you have to build the infrastructure that it can handle it. There's more than a 10 gig network interface. There's multiple 800 gig network interfaces that you can plug into a server if you need to these days. Yeah, it's not
Sure.
and disk drives can read like 150 gigabytes per second and stuff like this. So there is stuff that can make the stuff fast. But it's so if I do the backups with the recovery on the other side, so they continue, resume backup, the backups are so much slower that the infrastructure needs to be faster again, that then if I
Yeah.
turn it off, it doesn't save me that much. It's the checks after every failover is more complicated than just, okay, the backup failed, let's start a new one. Because
Yeah.
I wherever I run or so, I try to have in the SLA that any backup at any time can fail once. You cannot have two consecutive backups fail. So if a full backup is successful, the next one can fail. But then the next one must succeed. If two of them succeed automatic, then it's bad. And it's what I usually use is I do what I call intelligent retries. So I look at the error that actually came back from the backup. So for example, when it tells me the run out of space,
Yeah.
there's no point in doing the backup to the same location. Then I
No.
select the next available file share and try it there. If it told me, okay, it was a network blip or something, that the network connection was interrupted, okay, let's try it again. It should work now, unless I know it's an unstable network, then I would configure it to like, let's do a local one in the same data center, not cross data center or something. Yeah. So there's things that you can do there. But again, the same thing, if a log backup fails, okay, do the next one in 2 minutes or so. If that one succeeds, we're back in business. It can happen that something happens. Again, if I figure out, oh, it was out of space, move on to the next filer and make the log backup successful there. But it always has a single failure cannot alert DBAs or something, because that would be crazy, because things fail all the time and there's no point.
Yeah.
But consecutive failures, that it fails for more than once, that's a reason to think is. And again, might be priority. How important is the database? If it's one database where it's not that, then it's set to, okay, get it in the morning email that the DBA gives with the overnight report that, okay, these three databases failed, please investigate while they can't back up anymore. Might be that someone switched it to simple mode or some stupid thing, yeah?
Yeah.
Or whatever, yeah? I also have, like, my code usually does, like, another one is, if the error is that it can't take a diff backup, it promotes it to a full backup. Or if I try to take a log backup and it tells me it can't take a log backup because there's no full backup, it will immediately trigger a full backup or stuff like this.
Yeah.
So there's certain things that you can do. Also, what I do is, if the last differential backup is more than 30% of the database size, I also switch to a full backup, because there's no point in doing a differential backup that is basically the half of the database, because then again the restore would take way too long if I have to do differential backups. I try to avoid them, but again, sometimes for capacity reasons, it's the only valid option. I like full backups every day, because then if you have a failed one, it's not that critical. If you do full backups once a week, a failed one is much more critical. But yeah. So, but it's, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do to make it efficient. And for me, backups are usually the built-in stream to a file share or an S3 bucket or something like this. All the kinds of snapshotting things, it's nice. It's a convenience copy. It's not a backup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And my the problem is to have the ability to take snapshots means I have to have network attached storage, which is either fiber channel or some NAS or whatever, iSCSI or something. But that makes the storage so slow that it makes no sense. I save so much. I save some time during the backups, but during the normal operation during the day or doing a restore, it takes forever. While
Yeah.
when I have cheap and fast NVMe-based storage on the servers, and then a reasonably fast network cards, and the difference between a 10 gig and a 100 gig network card is now measured in dollars, not in thousands of dollars anymore. Yeah. The port costs, especially in a mid to large size environment, the port costs on the switches is marginal difference. I think between 10 and 25, it's literally $10 difference. And most of that money goes into the cable.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
the actual ports. It's because the chip on the network card for 10, 25, 50, and 100, it's the same chip.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no more difference. Nobody makes a 10 gig chip anymore. Yeah, it's 100 and you dial it down. Yeah, or
Sure.
the switch has a 100 gig port and breaks it out to 10 tens. Yeah,
Yeah.
or 425s or something. Yeah, there's very little price difference. Yeah, do they cost more? Yes, but again, it's a question. I saved so much on the storage that I can put a little bit more money in my backup switch. And the
Yeah.
nice thing is, backup switch can be really stupid switches. They don't need any awesome feature set. They can, like, all they need is a big pipe going in, a big pipe going out on the other side. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that helps more because it allows you to be more flexible because I can restore on something that is on a different storage. Yeah. I can restore to a different data center. With all the snapshotting thing, I'm very limited to whatever I have. I know that the
That's right.
storage vendors now work on solutions that they automatically mirror the snapshot somewhere else, but what they always forget to tell you how many hours this takes.
Mhm.
Yeah, because when having a total size of a petabyte is not uncommon anymore. Yeah. I'll even say 100 terabytes. 100 terabytes across multiple databases is not unheard of. Yeah. But copying 100 terabytes from one data center to another, that's a long operation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even the cloud providers know that because there's a reason there's Snowball and the Snow Truck or whatever they call it in Amazon, where they literally park a truck in front of your building and come with a fiber optic cable and says, plug it into your switch, we copy your data, then we drive it
Yeah.
to the data center and upload it there before you send it through the internet. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have, when it comes to internet access, a gigabit is easy. Everything above a gigabit, ooh, it's
Yeah.
exponential priced.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it just makes sense because there's limitations to that. It's a
Yeah.
lot easier to just drive a truck up with loads of disks and copy the stuff across, right? Makes sense.
And we've done it in the past. I worked for a different online entertainment company, but also in the betting industry, but different games. And they had their data center on an island in front of the UK, Isle of Man, and the backup data center was in an Indian reservation in Canada. And we had the data warehouse was 250 terabytes at the time. We're talking SQL 2008 to SQL 2012. So 250 terabytes was insane.
Big.
And we had log shipping between the two data
Wow.
centers. Every time that database broke, we pulled up the straws, and whoever pulled the short straw was on the next plane to the Isle of Man, disconnecting the backup drives, connecting new backup drives, then putting that in a suitcase and flying to Canada. And while the guy was flying with the full backup, we started to copy the differential backup and the log backups over. So when he was there, he plugged it all in, restored, and
Yeah.
that was hopefully the only trip. Sometimes 2 trips were necessary to get it running.
Oh, that sounds like my world trip setting up replication for my former employer. Similar thing. It was offices in countries where the internet just doesn't work very well. And the only way was to fly a disk with a backup or a snapshot for replication to start from.
And sometimes this is faster. We had many cases with Microsoft where they needed a memory dump from us. I'm like, okay, I can give you a memory dump if you can read it. And they're like, what do you mean? Yeah, my server has 2 terabytes of memory. I have no problem dumping that, but I will send you FedEx the disk. You will have it at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. And then you better have a system ready to read that memory dump because and the first time they thought we were joking, and then they bought a new machine to debug more memory dumps because it turns out that doesn't work on your regular laptop that well.
No, certainly doesn't.
Yeah, no, and that's all. It all comes down, you have to be prepared for whatever hits you. Yeah. So my advice is always have a couple of terabytes of extra drives lying around somewhere. It doesn't break the bank. Yeah.
Not anymore. It doesn't. No, that's true.
Yeah. And it can be USB. It doesn't matter how fast or slow they are. Sometimes it's just to have the extra capacity.
Yeah.
Because hey, you need an extra copy of the database restored again to get a couple of rows of data back. Yeah. But it's the big database that's 20 terabytes and there's no server with 20 terabytes free. Yeah. But you can find a workstation and plug in 20 USB drives with 1 terabyte each, and you will be able to restore there. Yeah. Should this be a permanent solution? No. Yeah. But again, if it's Friday afternoon and you can't purchase anything till Monday morning,
that's right.
It's be ready. Yeah. You can never have enough backups. Don't delete backups once your backup space is full, not when you reached a certain number.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's just, hey, before you start your backups, go through, okay, let's delete the oldest generation and thing is, but if you can keep 7 days or 8 days or 9 days, 1 day, it might save your behind. There is no, we already said snapshots are. At least your backup solution should be fully automated. If restore is also automated, it helps, or at least have something templated ready to gather the files from the various locations or something, or have a PowerShell script that creates the restore command or something. So you don't have to copy paste edit, because again, as you said, at 4 a.m. in the morning, even the simplest copy paste edit will result in wrong things. Luckily, the restore command usually immediately complains about stuff that doesn't add up, but the worst thing is if you restore the wrong backup for 8 hours and then you have to start again, because that's a conversation you don't want to have with anybody higher up in the chain, because there is no excuse for that. If you restore it and it doesn't work, that's a different story. But if you just pick the wrong backup, it's either for the wrong database or for the wrong date or time. That is usually very hard to explain. But
yes, definitely.
It's also easy to avoid, but if possible, have a second set of eyes.
The easy way to avoid it is, like you say, to have scripting automation in place to say, do the thing for me, make the choices for me. Rather than having to pick the files from the folders, copy them to the right place and do the stuff, right? A really great one, like you said about PowerShell, is the DBA tools has a command in there, which if you point it at a folder structure, it reads through, compiles the files needed to make the restore that you need. I forget the exact command, but it's I'll put it in the chat. The DBA tools is the best set of commands you can use.
Yeah, no, it's and again, if your system outgrows the DBA tools because one file share is not enough anymore, so it's not rocket science to get that stuff running in a larger environment.
No, indeed.
And people like you and me, we are available to help with stuff like this. Yeah. and it's fun to do so. And yeah. Yeah. So while this was probably not a technical super deep dive in the itty-gritty options of every backup command on the planet, I think it was a very good discussion about how to get
The things to consider, at least, the
to
things that we run
approach
into,
this.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
I think the summary is figure out what you actually need, which hopefully removes 90% of the work, and then
Yes.
do the 10% really good. Yeah.
Yeah, and
The problem
simplify
is,
it as much as possible. Don't be
yeah,
exotic just because you can be. Keep it as simple
yeah,
as
no,
possible.
yeah, no. KISS is a very good strategy.
Big time. Especially around this, especially around restoring service when everybody's all wound up and
Yeah.
excited and
And
under pressure and
test
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen so funny DR test methods. I've once consulted this. This is almost like 35 years ago. I consulted for a company. The CTO had an awesome game that they played every day. He wanted to ensure that people don't store data locally on their machines, but store it on the network drive so they can take backups. So what
Yep.
he did is he had a one of these big hats, that cylindrical hats that people had, with the
Yep.
name of each and every employee in a little piece of paper. And every morning he came in and grabbed one out and said, went to his junior and says, "Hey, his hard drive is corrupt. Replace it with a new one."
Ah, nice.
And they played that game for like a year.
And
After
everybody
that,
learned.
they didn't find a single file on any computer because word of mouth spreads so fast that at any day it can
Yeah,
hit
yeah.
you that your data is gone when you save it locally. I
Oh,
mean, they
that's
still had a way
fantastic.
to recover it, but it
Yeah,
was a
no, but
good
it makes a
learning
very
exercise.
easy way to make it clear. Look, do it the right way for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
And you can play the same with your backup strategy so that you test it. Every day you pick a database name out of a hat and give it to the junior DBA and says, okay, restore
Restore this
that one on
database.
the test server under the name
Yeah,
of today's date. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And every day you pick another one and give it to different DBA. So everybody knows how to restore. Everybody knows how to access it. Everybody make sure they have all the tools and the right things in their
Yeah.
environment thing. We get a question.
Yeah, that's another one. Yeah, pick a name out of the hat and
Ah,
say that
yeah,
person's off today. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's. I mean, they're on vacation, they're ill,
Yeah.
whatever, right? They're at a conference, they're not available, so they can sit in the office and do their work, but you've got to ignore them. They're not allowed to be asked.
Yeah,
It's a really good move.
we've got a DR strategy that we do for a bunch of folks where this one company that we work with fails over and runs from DR for the first week of every month. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, they can demonstrate that they can fail over. And so the Thursday night before or the Thursday beforehand, the CIO gets everybody in the room and it's like, okay, we're failing over tomorrow. And he'll look around, he'll pick four people out of the room. He's like, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead. And they can't touch or be involved with anything related to the failover and fail back. And if the processes that they have documented and scripted don't allow anybody in that room to fail it over and successfully fail it back, they fail. They can
Mhm,
fail over 900 servers in 45 minutes tops. It's amazing.
mhm.
It's really good. They've
So
obviously found that to be a requirement for them to be happy to continue working.
They're in a heavily regulated industry in the
Yeah, there you
trucking and
go.
logistics, and it has to be up for the
Yeah,
safety of the drivers and regulatory bodies. And
nice.
it is incredible that they can fail over and fail back. It actually took their business insurance down by almost 50%.
Yeah, well,
the
if you can demonstrate you're resilient, then of course that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
and
It's
the
a
one
little bit
com
similar. Netflix used to. I don't know if they still do. They had a
they still
system
have
called
the Chaos Monkey.
Chaos Monkey, right?
Yeah.
So it's a system that just goes and breaks stuff in their network, um, applications,
And on the server,
storage,
they
networking,
restart
whatever.
services, turn off
Yeah,
servers.
yeah,
It's really nasty, but
yeah.
it runs all the time. So Netflix is always in a degraded state.
Yes.
But that's how they know it's operating. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, because their systems are built to be resilient to outages, which is fantastic. I don't recommend everybody should go and do the same in their own networks, but I said that at one of my first jobs when I moved to Germany was we just installed a brand new storage system from IBM, and the IBM people said it's amazing. It can deal with outages. A disk can fail and it will not fall over. Blah 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 blah. So I suggested, well, pull 3 disks out right now. We've not taken it into production. Just prove that this will be fine. If the system is as safe as you say it is, we could just pull 3 disks and nothing will happen. And that was when this technician was like, oh, I don't know. So wait a minute, we're supposed to be paying thousands and thousands for this system, and you won't even pull the drives when it's not in production. So how are we supposed to believe it will be fine in production? So I'm a big advocate for that, especially bringing a new system. Prove it to me. Turn shit off. Pull a power plug. Pull the network cable. Prove to me that it's resilient.
If you really want to make them cry, in all these storage arrays, so what they have is they usually have a fully redundant system. So they have 2 computers in there that are completely redundant. The problem is the only way to do that is to run them in what's called lockstep. That means they are both using the same system frequency generator. So the same quartz is used in both of them. So there's one component. That component cannot fail. It's basically a crystal that swings in a certain frequency when electricity is pointed to it. That you cannot kill this thing in an electronic way. So they are correct that it's enough to have one of them. But if you really want to make it cry, it's like I've just pulled one component. Bing.
Exactly.
The whole thing is over. And it doesn't
redundant.
matter. Sun, or these days Oracle, the M4000 or M8000, they're super like 1000 CPU servers or so. Same thing. They have this one thing. The difference is that HP in their Superdomes has the exact same thing. Everybody has it. There's no way. Your $99 main board or your $100 laptop has the same thing. If you pull it out, the thing stops working. You cannot make it redundant because you will never find 2 that have the same frequency.
Exactly.
There will be a microhertz difference in the frequency, so you can't use them. It's why clocks are never precise. Every clock runs off time. It's just impossible. And HP literally excludes this from the list of redundant components, while Oracle does not. So in Oracle, you just pull it and says, "Hey, you said it's fully redundant, but it's apparently not." And this thing can be easily located. So if you really want a storage array, and the other one is if it's EMC, the first 3 drives in the first shelf. Because that's where the operating system is, and it's on a RAID 5. So you can only lose 2 drives or 1 drive. So pull the first 3. Doesn't matter. It's works with data domain as well. So because they're using an EMC array under the hood. So it's fun there. But the thing is, one thing for when you do DR planning, for example, in one company where we actually went to a DR office twice a year. After I was there the first, I changed our checklist for DR. And the checklist was for the DBA, it's very important to have noise canceling headphones. The reason was the DBA seat in that remote office was located right next to the receptionist, which picked up the phone about once every 10 seconds and said the same hello sequence on the phone.
Nice.
And for the first 5 minutes, it's annoying. After that, you want to strangle them, but they're doing their job. But you need noise canceling headphones because otherwise you will not survive the DR.
That's an office space reference for sure.
Yeah, no, it's a thing. It was a list. So in their go bag had a pair of noise canceling headphones in it with a set of spare batteries, just to make sure you can do your job. Because if you're in a DR scenario and you can't concentrate,
definitely.
The guy sitting on the other side of the room, no problem. But there were like 5 or 6 seats that were surrounding this very nice lady that did her best because Normally there was like 5 of them that were splitting the cost between them, but in the DR scenario, she was the only one. And
Only
like
one,
every
yeah.
10
Yeah, that makes
seconds, she
sense.
had to route another call.
It's environmental concerns. I had to deal with one once where a DR storage array kept dropping drives and nobody could figure out why. So I went there on site and it was in New Jersey. And I'm just sitting in front of the array, just looking at it, going, what the heck is going on? And all of a sudden, and I stepped out back and they were 20 feet from a commuter rail line.
Ah, there we go.
It's like, yeah, a
We
little vibration there. So we moved the array to the other side of the room and it was fine.
we had on average our servers had about 100 disk drives with rotating spindles in the days. So we had on average about 100 drives per server, and we usually had about 5 failures per year per server, which is not a bad number.
Mhm.
And one server we had about 5 to 6 failures per day.
Wow.
Only one machine. We replaced them. Okay, something happened. Doesn't matter. Bam, failed again, failed again, failed again. Got a little bit better after a while, but it was still things. Same thing as David. I decided, no, I have to see what's wrong there. And I didn't have the shaky thing, but I had a constant vibration when I was standing in front of this thing. And behind me was an outlet for air conditioning thing that had a broken fan. So that thing vibrated that one cabinet where that one server was so much
Wow.
that we had an insane amount of drive failures there. And the nice thing was we're like, okay, no problem. First of all, fix the AC. That's the easy fix. Secondly, we're gonna replace all the drives in that machine with new ones. And I want all the other drives that are still spinning. And they're like, why you want the ones that were vibrated that much? If they didn't die by now, they are the best
They're
drives on the
invincible.
planet. If we ever have really important data, it goes on these drives
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they already went through hell and they're still running.
It reminds me of the failover cluster instance that had a problem. It would just randomly fail over, just arbitrarily. Didn't matter when. It was always during the day though, and showed up on site, went and looked at it. Everything seemed okay. It, two machines, opposite corners of the data center, crossover cable, everything looked okay. And then we go into the data center, thing failed over. Somebody gets a page, went back to his desk, looking at what's going on. Did it about 3 or 4 times. Long story short, somebody had run the crossover cable not per their normal networking standards. We went and looked. The crossover cable was actually running into a hole in the wall that looked like the shape of a steel toe boot, and it went up instead of below the raised floor. And they had decided to drape said cable over fluorescent lights. So every single time somebody turned on the lights in the server room, the thing failed over.
Nice.
Low tech solution. We went to Lowe's and bought some zip ties and zip tied it to the rafters until we could get a maintenance window to run it properly.
No, it's always the unexpected thing. Yeah. In
Yeah.
one company we had excellent working failover clustering, and then suddenly clusters started failing over, and when they failed over, the IP addresses got mangled up every time. We're like, what's going on? And what happened is that the sysadmins made a change. They expanded the capacity of the DNS servers. So they added more DNS servers and put them behind a load balancer. So what happened is when the cluster sent its DNS updates, the first update got to the first DNS server, the second update got to the second DNS server, third, and when they then reconciled, all the changes of the first ones got undone by the ones that did the changes later. It happens, and you have no idea why. And again, whatever you think can go wrong, it will be worse.
Yeah.
So make sure whatever you built handles everything you can come up with, and then you will be good and well equipped for the things that you didn't think about.
Yep.
If your solution is already on shaky ground to begin with and just works like on the limit, on the cutting edge, on the bleeding edge, then you are not prepared for the unknown.
And this
And
is
the
where
unknown will happen.
guaranteed.
Someone will have a stupid idea, someone will have a good idea and doesn't think about the second, third order consequences. Yeah.
And this is where the art of troubleshooting really comes into play.
Yeah. Yeah.
True
No.
DR scenarios will bring out the best troubleshootings in the business.
Yeah. No. And there is always a way to recover or something. But it sometimes doesn't go as you planned it. And then you have to learn and readjust your plans because there's always surprises, things are missing, you can't get to it. Especially as we said before, I think it's worth mentioning again, if you have encrypted backups, make sure your encryption keys are accessible in a DR scenario, that they are
Yep.
also in both data centers. The next one is never trust online documentation. When you're in a DR scenario, that is not going to be the high priority thing that goes online again. Your internal wiki page or whatever where you think your documentation is, no. Hit the printer, put it in a binder, and have the binder at least in every office, or better with every DBA or whoever is on call has it in the go bag. Yes, it's a few extra pounds or kilograms if you're in Europe to carry around, but it's still having to wait 3 hours for some documentation system to come up so you can learn where to find your backup keys or backup encryption keys or something, or which key belongs to which database, which
Yep.
also, yes, I'm agree each one should have a different one, but then you also need to be able to identify them easily, which gets back to how to name things properly. It's yeah. That's pretty much. Yeah.
I saw this directly. Data center power outage, probably 20,000 VMs. All the documentation was digital.
Yeah.
It's a chicken and egg scenario.
Mhm. Yeah.
Fun
We
times.
we had one case where we failed over and it was great. And all that had to be done manually was one thing, one DNS entry had to be changed for the whole failover to make work. There was one thing. The problem was to change the DNS, you needed access through a tool that used the database that would have worked after the DNS change.
Nice.
So the problem is, every time you did a DR test, it worked just fine because it snuck the data from the other data center. But when you had an actual DR, it didn't work. So every time people do a DR test, I'm like, yeah, so let's discuss what actually is. Is someone unplugging the network? Yeah. No, we're just like pretending it's down. I'm like, no, that's not a DR test. That's
No,
a check mark on a document that you need. You can just put the check mark now because what you're doing is not a DR test. At least have someone shut down the network port. Better is someone unplugs the cable because
yep.
that's actually showing what's happening. Yeah. I'm not
I,
saying hit the power distribution system with a baseball bat every time, but
but that's
that's the real
fun.
test.
But that's so
Yeah.
much fun. Now, if you can't run from DR, you haven't had a real test.
Oh no,
Yeah.
yeah, and with primary actually off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love the R tests that are forced on you where like the data center has to do some maintenance where they literally have to turn off the power or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you actually have to really go to the DR data center. Or as your company, like the first week of every month. What the gambling company in Austria does is they run 1 month in one data center and then the other month on the other data center. I mean, they're in the same city. This is the HA. The DR is far away, so they at least test their HA, and they are confident enough that when they can synchronize between two data centers, they also synchronize the third one. Yeah, but at least they flip over once a month, and that worked pretty good so far.
Yeah.
And the
You're
nice
not
thing is the
just,
latency. There's no latency difference because it's Yeah, they
Yeah,
are.
it's basically the same place.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
you're
they're
doing a true
11.
test.
They're less than 10 miles apart. So you can measure, but you cannot feel latency between the data centers.
Yep.
It's yes, the traffic is routed, but it feels like they are connected all to the same switch. Especially they have like I don't know how many 100 gigabit lines between them because they only have like 4 fibers, but they use this multicoloring thing to have like lots of connections in the same cable where each one runs on a different color. Uh,
Yep.
and that gives a lot of bandwidth for both backups and regular traffic. So taking a backup in the other data center feels like taking it local. There's no
Yeah. Exactly.
copying it to the DR side that you can feel. And the DR is just in a different country in Europe. Yeah. So it's like an
Still
hour
not
plane
around the
right away.
corner. Yeah.
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 But it's that you can feel that their latency and all these delays start. That's also something when you have a DR that you might need the backups at your DR side and not at your primary side. Uh, and even if you can access your primary side for the backups for some reason, it might take forever to restore on the DR side when you have to. And you will, in any failover scenario, there's the chance of having a corrupt database on the other side, um, which might have been there for a long time, or just during to the failover something happened. Yeah, because you don't know. You're doing routine maintenance right now while the failover happens, and your
Yeah.
database is not in async. It's suddenly in async instead of synchronous mode, and you fail over.
Yep.
Yeah, because you had to
That's
do
when
something.
disaster always strikes, when you're not quite ready.
Yeah, no, it's you cannot assume that it will happen in the most convenient point in time.
Yeah.
It will happen in the most inconvenient time. That's
Guaranteed.
also why some companies go for triple redundancy instead just double. That even if you kill one system during maintenance, you still have two to go.
Yeah, if the business needs are there and they've got the budget,
Yeah.
more
So
is
I
better in
went
that
through
case.
my list of what I normally talk about, and we talk way more than I normally do because normally we're limited to an hour. But
We got
I
all the
don't have.
time in the world for this stuff.
Hey, your GPU needs something to do now to re-encode this.
Yeah, I'll put a logo on there. So for anybody who has stuck this out with these awesome folks, thank you very much. If you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, we welcome your comments. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions or comments on not only the session, but quite literally, if there's any topic in the business continuity space that you want to see, let us know. We will write sessions for you. We'll do roundtable or truncated icosahedron sessions like this for you. It's a lot of fun. We really do enjoy this stuff. And if
Yeah,
you're in the operations space, it's not a glamorous topic, but it sure is essential. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.
thank you.
Thanks a lot.